Meeting of the Falmouth Conservation Commission. At this time, I'll ask you to please silence your electronic devices. If you're going to hold a private conversation, please take it outside. This meeting is being recorded by FCTV. If there's anybody else recording this meeting, please identify yourself for the record. If you're here to speak on any matter before the commission, and we encourage you to do so, you'll have to do so from the podium and state your name for the record. First up, congratulations to reappointments. Thank you for serving. Welcome back to Russ Robbins. Thank you for serving. Vote minutes, June 12th, 2019. Don't everybody speak at once, please?
Mr. Chairman, I reviewed the minutes and I found them to be essentially accurate. I'd recommend that we approve them as written.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None.
Wasn't here for him, abstained.
One abstention. Non-participant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
you've
really
been saying
can't,
that a lot tonight.
you really can't. Abstaining means something else, that kind of a negative vote. So just don't
Don't
say
vote.
I
anything.
don't say nothing at all.
He wasn't
I
here.
disagree with that, Bessie, but
Oh, okay.
I will just
Got
say
it.
nothing.
Mr. Roberts here?
All right, moving on. Request for continuance under notice of intent. Paul and Gretchen DePoo, 12 Seabrook Drive, Falmouth, Mass. For permission to install new patio, kitchenette, fire pit, retaining walls, and install mitigation plantings.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this one is being continued until next week's meeting, the 17th.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So moved. Town of Falmouth, care of DPW Engineering, 59 Town Hall Square, Falmouth, Mass. For permission to expand the existing parking lot in the rear of the building.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Mr. Chairman, we still do not have a DEP number. They have sent off their revisions to DEP, so we anticipate a number by next week. So we'd like to continue that till June 17th.
Seems to be
July,
taking a long
sorry.
time.
Sorry.
Well, it's DEP's number.
It's the fifth
They
continuance.
won't issue a number.
What?
It's the fifth continuance.
I know, but
Just for a
they're at the
record.
mercy of DEP.
Okay.
I have a question.
I promised I wouldn't
Are
do
we
that.
gonna get a landscape plan with that? Or is the little tiny plan with,
I think the little tiny
Any
plan is
bushes?
that. If you want a bigger plan, I can get that for you.
well, yeah, I don't quite understand what they're putting where.
Okay. All right,
you.
I'll have Jeremiah, the tree warden who came up with the plan, provide a little bit more detail for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So moved.
We have a motion and a question?
No.
Okay. Motion and a second. All those in favor of continuing to 7/17, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Request for a continuance to amend existing order of conditions. Bruno Gelinelli, Baggio LP, 117 Surf Drive, Falmouth, Mass. For permission to amend EEP 25-4322 by rearranging approved concrete patio and replacing existing gravel driveway with pavers.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the applicant is requesting a continuance until August 21st.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
there's been some construction that went on before we voted on the change, and I wondered what the status was.
It has stopped.
It stopped.
It has stopped.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Do we have a motion and a second? All those in favor of continuing to August 21st, say aye.
Right.
Opposed? None. Request for determination of applicability, Lynn Falkenberg, 38 Drift Road, Falmouth, Mass. For permission to conduct ordinary maintenance by hand placing stone within voids in existing riprap and seeking local approval for Chapter 91 purposes.
Yes, Mr. Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any public comment? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Next up, 4 Foster Road LLC, 4 Foster Road, East Falmouth, Mass. For permission to install Title V septic system, demolish existing shed, and construct a detached garage with new driveway access.
Yes, Mr. Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any public comment? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Alcoa Realty LLC, 451 Wild Harbor Road, Falmouth, Mass. For permission to rebuild a new, how is this? Permission to rebuild a new single-family dwelling with all structures located outside of the 100-foot resource area buffer.
Yes, Mr. Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So move.
Second.
Question.
We have a motion and a second.
I have a question, pure semantics, but how do you rebuild something that's new?
Well, you heard me stutter, right? There you
So
go.
it's a raise and rebuild, but they tore the existing structure down and they're pulling it outside of the flood zone and outside of all
So they
resource areas.
built a new building and then they're tearing it down?
No,
No, there was a house there, they tore it down.
typo, Courtney.
Everything's coming
This
back.
needs to be more clearly worded before you submit
Mr.
it.
Bird is our
Thank you.
new English teacher. Welcome.
Wow,
We need a raise, RAZE.
everybody is uppity tonight.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any public comment? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Judith Berg, 344 Pinecrest Beach Drive, East Falmouth, Mass. For permission to install mitigation and restoration plantings per order of conditions for DEP 25-3679.
Yes, Mr. Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So move.
Second. Can I have a question?
We
Question.
have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Question.
Yeah, but
if-
my question was
Okay, go
asked,
ahead.
I was asked first. So, is this a case that their order of conditions has run out and they want a certificate of compliance and that, okay, right?
That's exactly it.
Correct.
That's my question.
Yep.
Okay.
And they shouldn't seek an extension?
They
They
can't,
can't,
it's already
it's expired.
closed.
Yeah, it's
They're
Oh,
already
I'm
past.
sorry, you said that.
They'll
Yeah.
be coming
you.
in for a certificate of
Okay.
compliance hearing.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. It's unanimous. Continued request for determination of applicability. Gary Moskowitz, 177 Coonamessett Circle, East Falmouth, Mass. For permission to vista prune according to FWR 10.18-10-B.
Yes, Mr. Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So move.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Requests for hearings under a notice of intent. All hearings of the Falmouth Conservation Commission are held simultaneously under the authorities of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision of the commission is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. First up, Denisa and Sheldon Wagner. Let me back up. We're gonna take 46, 50, and 54 collectively. So let me go through all three first. Denisa and Sheldon Wagner, 46 Gosnell Road, Woods Hole, Mass. For permission to reconstruct existing storm-damaged seawall into a sloped riprap and install mitigation plantings. Also, Robin Ackroyd, 50 Gosnold Road, Woods Hole, Mass. For permission to reconstruct existing storm-damaged seawall into a sloped riprap and install mitigation plantings. And Maya Berger and Christian Jaggi, 54 Gosnold Road, Woods Hole, Mass. For permission to reconstruct existing storm-damaged seawall into a sloped riprap and install mitigation plantings. Mr. Martin, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, David Martin here on behalf of all three property owners.
This is Lisa?
3 notice of intents. I did file, for a matter of record, 3 individual site plans for each property. You'll see in your packets for number 46, I also included an overall plan. I think that makes it considerably easier to understand what's going on here. House number 46 is on the left in your, as you look at the plan.
Pull that microphone into you, would you
I'm
please?
sorry.
Thank you.
Number 46 is on your left. You'll see all 3 properties have a seawall fronting on Buzzards Bay. The 2 left, the center property and the left property have a vertical wall. I'd like to make a small correction in my narrative. I referred to the third wall as a vertical wall. It's partially sloped and partially vertical. 2 winters ago, these walls were destroyed by the first of 3 winter storms we had. You'll see the areas of erosion that I've shown. The walls are fractured, pieces have fallen out beyond repair. So this is an opportunity to create one access, come in, reconstruct the walls with a shared access. The center property is the natural access because the driveway exists. We'll cross through a buffer. We've provided you with a restoration planting plan for that area. The contractor would access there, build a temporary road along the top of the wall to the left as you look at the plan, disassemble the wall, and reconstruct it as he worked his way back to the access road. He'd then turn and go the other direction, begin at the far end of the wall, disassemble and reconstruct, and then close his way out at the access, and then remove off-site. That's sort of an overview. I'd happily answer questions.
I met out on the site with Dave on Monday, and no questions after that.
Mr. Chairman, Bill, can you explain your planting plans to the board as well? Yep, please. This is the middle one. Do you have the planting plans, Dave?
Yep, one
Okay,
second.
excellent,
Yeah,
thank you.
Working on that. This is,
Yes.
All 3 of the plans are on that one.
oh,
Scroll down.
scroll down. Thank you for that, Brendan.
Yep.
So you got the mouse right here. Scroll up and down. It's our first try, both of us running this here. How we doing?
Is this your first time? You're doing a good job.
Yeah, he is.
It's a little too light.
We'll help you, Bill.
The 3 properties, the 2 on the right, there aren't any really changes in the planting plan. It's just to get them in and get them out.
Okay.
And there's a whole mess of rugosa rose, some dead pines, some cedars, beach grass, a few invasives, and that'll all get trashed and we'll just replant it. And I think the plan shows a lot of plants to go back in to restore what's already there, including a bunch of trees, which are gonna be tough to establish, but small enough local suppliers, I think we can do it.
So my question, Bill, is on 40,
54?
it's 50, I think it's 54. No, construction access is in 50. Yeah,
But she's asking about the plantings, 54.
okay, so the planning on 54, that seems to be, so is there a lot of shrub material that you're taking out and just replanting it with the beach grass?
That's the one on the left?
Well, if I'm looking at them, it's the one on the left.
Yeah, right.
If Ocean's at my back, yes.
Right, that's the one with sort of the biggest backyard, in a
Yes.
sense. And there's not much of one, but they have some concrete, a concrete wall that we would replace in the same footprint. It's a new owner, and they want to dress it up a little bit, but not where the
Along.
natural beach grass and walls are. They want a little bit of lawn that they can sit out to. It's been kind of ignored for a number of years. That's the
Yeah,
one that's
it
a little
was-
different from the other ones.
Yeah, that's why I kind of caught my eye when I was out in the field. It's definitely it's definitely heavily vegetated and definitely overgrown. So some of that Rosa Rugosa you're replacing with the beach grasses. I just wanted clarification on that.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
two big
okay.
beds going down the sides that are kind of a
Yeah.
mess, and we would replant that.
Okay, no, I just wanted a clarification, because I went out there, I was like, huh. Okay, that was it, Bill, thank you.
Okay?
Courtney?
No questions.
Kevin?
No questions.
Betsy?
Dave? I know you'd be disappointed if I didn't ask a question.
Oh, thank you,
Do you
Betsy.
require a Chapter 91 license?
No, we don't. And you'll note on the plan, there's one part of that wall in the central lot that's a 90-degree right angle. And if you happen to have been able to get to the site, that section of the wall suffered severely, and there's essentially no earth behind it. We intend to remove that and cut the corner right off, if you will. So we're actually moving back from mean high water, I don't have the exact number, something in the order of 20 feet. So we're presently above mean high water, and the closest portion of the structure to mean high water is moving landward 20 feet, and that will become a new coastal beach,
Yeah.
which is a good thing, because hard corners in a shore protection don't work well. You want it all to be smooth transitions. So we're just taking that corner and just blending it
Smoothing it
right
out.
out.
So I had one other question. So I think it's the middle, it's either the middle or I'm looking out at the water, or the one over to the left
Right?
has some big rocks, like if you were doing a septic system and you were pulling it out.
That's the center property. That's my dear friend Robin Ackroyd, who started this process for us.
So you're keeping those rocks and
She's-
adding one or two big rocks there?
No, she's very attached to her rocks, and from the get-go made it very clear that she wanted to keep her rocks, which I can understand. It offers protection.
I did the same thing for my house, but, so
Yeah.
I understand that.
Right, so nominally I would state for the record that we intend to keep the rocks. Whether they're exactly those rocks or there are as many, it's not clear. We need to construct the wall and see what makes sense. But something on the order of that many rocks would remain in the yard, except those that were displaced by the wall, obviously.
Okay.
And we might tuck them in a little bit. I don't want to run any risk of the rocks washing into the structure. So,
Okay, thanks.
thank you.
If they're gonna do this with excavator or crane, do you know?
We use an excavator, track excavator with a thumb. I'll speak a minute about that. Dale Briggs is the contractor for the 3 projects. I've worked with Dale for decades. He does the highest quality work of anyone I could find, so 3 generations of family members doing riprap, so.
Yeah, 'cause it's seriously damaged down there. I don't think it'd make another fall of storms.
No, I was quite,
Yeah.
there was some challenges getting everybody on board, just timing challenges, and people aren't here. Robin in the center wanted to start work right away. Obviously, she's high risk there. So where was I headed with that? Last winter, we did not have a wall in place, and it made me quite uneasy. So we are scheduled very tight this end of summer to hopefully get the structures built after the summer season and before the fall and winter storms.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Steve?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Peter?
Yes.
What is the difference between the proposed cross-sections versus the prior cross-sections, and how long, or how much better are the cross-sections?
I'll start with your last part of your question. Significantly better. How to quantify that, that's hard to know. I consider all these structures temporary in nature when we're dealing with Mother Nature, but we do what's reasonable. The structures that are there, if you had a chance to go out there, you maybe didn't, are built, are vertical, which in itself is a problem, because it takes more, it gets hit harder when it's vertical. A sloped wall, because the water is being driven up the wall, is absorbing that energy because it's elevating the water, and gravity is taking some of the energy out of the water. The small stones and the mortar don't have very much mass. They rely on the bond between the mortar and the stone, and that has failed over time. That fails from frost, things of that nature. If that wall, vertical wall, gets hit hard, it could just simply crack. At that point, it really doesn't have much structure left. A sloped riprap wall, the more it's hit, the stronger it gets to a point. These boulders are setting in a bed of chip stones, and we have taken a can of sand and gravel and shaken it, it sort of settles down and becomes more and more compact the more you bang on it. So that's what a gravity riprap wall does as it's being hammered by the waves.
Okay,
So
thank you.
they pack tighter and tighter.
Good, Mark?
Are you going to do the work from the top of the wall,
A straddle the wall, so we'd come in,
from the landward side of this wall?
yes and no. We'd straddle the wall, typically in a case like this. When we come in, there's that area where the corner stuck out where it's heavily damaged there. That makes a nice turning area, so you can get the machine. The machine's coming in facing the ocean, it needs to turn at 90 degrees to get down the wall. Some of the wall that's there will get lowered, and you basically make a temporary road with a track inboard of the wall and a track outboard of the wall. Typical construction puts a row of boulders along the outside of the wall, and the machine can crawl out there, and that material that he's crawled out in then becomes the material for the wall.
The foot of the new wall, will that be essentially at the same location seaward as the current vertical wall is?
Exactly, yep.
So that means that wall's gonna slope back more into the property, especially the middle property.
Yes, in the middle property, it's really an issue. She has no real estate to speak of between the house.
There's no property.
There's no property
landward
there,
of the
yeah.
wall, so how is
Yeah.
the vehicle gonna get in there to do any work if there's no place to put it unless you take the deck out?
It's very tight.
It's
Yeah.
not, but there's a deck there.
We're working seaward of the deck, but it's extremely tight working conditions.
4 feet.
Right, right,
really tight.
right. And that relies on somebody that's extremely competent at their work and some care, and the stone gets handled one by one as the wall gets built.
So the
Yeah.
plan is you think you can stay on top of the hill and build, just clarifying, and build the slope, keep the foot where it is, and then let it slope back at 45 degrees or whatever.
Yeah, let me speak to your question just previously about the problem with constructing it. Again, the wall that's there gets lowered and spread out, if you will. So it's a working platform, and that takes place as you progress to the end of the furthest property, and the wall gets built as you work your way out. So you're never working on the slope. The slope is always,
Working in front of you.
you're working in front of you and you're backing up, so you've got the slope completed. You can't go back.
What's gonna happen to the big boulders that are sitting out in the water now? Are you gonna
We-
scoop them back and use them somewhere?
I don't believe we intend to do any work on the beach or seaward
Half
there.
a dozen pretty good-sized boulders out there seaward of the wall now.
There's no intention to do any work on the beach.
So you're gonna leave them there?
We're going to leave them there. I did note in my narrative that we would intend to carefully remove any wall debris that we encounter on the beach. If you were down there, you saw there's some concrete and steel and things like that. That would be very discreet just by observation, just to clean up the debris from the beach area.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion from the board?
I'll make a motion to close the hearing, take it under advisement.
Well, I'll second, I have a comment.
We have a motion and a second. You have another comment?
Just a comment that this was one of the most spectacular sights in terms of seeing what Mother Nature can do
Yes.
that we've had. I mean, we've had others, you know, kind of a little bit, right? But this was dramatic.
Yeah, it really ripped the place up.
Yeah,
That's why I was very nervous last winter.
yeah.
We didn't
I
have it.
assume that people don't live in those houses in the winter.
Yes, the center home is Robin's,
Lives there year-round?
yeah,
Well, that must have been exciting.
yeah. I want to go down in the next, when we get all done, we'll go down in the next storm, sit in the living room, see how I did.
Yeah.
Jen, there's no chapter 91, this doesn't need to go before the Board of
You just
Selectmen.
said it doesn't need a chapter 91,
Does
he's
this
above.
need to go before the Board of Selectmen?
I don't believe so. Dave, do you have to go before the Board of Selectmen for the seawall?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay,
Oh, 91 was, well,
I don't think so.
I don't think
Peter,
we've ever
do you
done
know that answer?
Huh?
I don't think we've ever had them.
You don't know the answer? Oh, okay.
Asking the question.
Well, because I believe the reason is because we're not,
Quick point of
we're not in the waters.
So
No, I don't think you do, Dave.
we're considering these three together in a hearing. We will be issuing three separate orders, one for each property.
We'll have to vote separately.
Yeah, correct,
Okay.
correct.
Okay, any public comments, sir?
Yes.
Would you like the site plan on the screen?
Yeah, leave that up.
please.
yeah, the site, the three that you
Yeah.
have. Good.
My name is Donna Du Brown. I live at 30 Gardner Road. So when you're looking at this and you are at Robbins, and then you have Maya's, and then you have Donna Du Brown and Marcia Du on the end. We have a very low wall, and so we had no major damage. But my concern on this project is, what will it do when they speak about going in this direction on a wall, turning around and coming back, what effect it will have on ours because the property is right next to each other. And I just wanted to bring it to your attention that, you know, we're hoping there won't be any compromising or erosion or damage to our property since it's so close.
Dave, do you want to address
And,
that?
you know, I know Dave, so we all know
If you wanna
each
address
other
any.
from Winslow.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I met on site with someone from the previous speaker's family, and that question had come up. I'll draw your attention to the cross-sections. I can put them on the screen. But that is the wall that I mentioned earlier. That is a riprap, a sloped riprap wall with a vertical wall atop it. So in that case, and the failure with the wall that's there now is that someone chose to mortar it, and it's not built to present-day standards. So in the case of that wall, we would simply be replacing the wall at the same slope, at the same location, with the improvement that it would not be mortared. It would have a rougher surface because of the way it's constructed without the mortar. It would be porous, and we would put the return on it. I would have a slightly different opinion about the condition of the adjoining property a year and a half ago when I went to the site, but that's not perhaps important as looking at the plan and seeing where that erosion is at the end of our property. The end of our wall, previous wall, that sloped wall, failed, and the water got around behind it and created that big pocket. And that's why we create these returns on the wall to protect the ends of the wall. And it allows the wall to taper into the natural grade and become a sort of a smooth transition. Anytime you have a smooth transition, the water flows smoothly over it. If you have an abrupt change, you get scouring. So I believe the conditions with the new work will be improved over what they presently are for the abutting property.
Thank you. Mark?
I've got a question. Are you replacing the wall on the easternmost property? the wall that's mostly revetment?
Yeah, yes, and when you look at that wall, you might ask yourself why we're doing that. And there was a question the owner came up, raised. The first third of the wall with the erosions behind has been undermined and fallen. It's broken free from the structure. And when you look at the remaining part of the wall, which the owner was very interested in salvaging because of the cost considerations, under further inspection, you find that the back of that wall has been entirely washed out. It's a hollow tube, which is very common for mortared walls. And the reason for that is they can't do what I was describing earlier, is to settle in, because they're all stuck together as a unit, so they don't adjust to any movement. So the remaining third section of that wall in the center is a big void behind, and you can't see further than that, so I don't know about the
But your
the
idea
last
is
of it.
that if that wall that looks like a revetment is pulled out and replaced, you're gonna replace it with something which is hydraulically the same as what's there now as far as downstream effects.
Yes, and I would submit somewhat, perhaps slightly, but improved over that.
Sir?
Thank you.
Where's the easel up there?
I'm Damien Kufler. I live at 49 Gosnelder Road, directly across from Robin Ackroyd, the middle property. I have three questions. One is, are there assurances that the seaward side of the wall will not be moved any further into the beach than it is presently? I think that has to be assured. It's very easy to miss up, make mistakes, and it just creeps forward. A second question is, David mentioned that the corner, the 90-degree angle will be shifted, made a continuous flow. I'm wondering if that might have any impact on the shifting of the sands in the area, because we know how drastic even such shifts can be. The third question is whether or not, David mentioned that where the road is going to go in, we're just going to put in some trees and shrubs, you know. That's pretty vague, that being one part of our sea view through there. I want assurances that we don't have some trees and shrubs that obscure our view. The original house that was put up, there was both extensions on either side, significantly eliminated much of our view, and I just hope it doesn't get reduced even further. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Any further discussion?
Is there going to be these questions addressed?
Dave?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, previous speaker. I can assure you that the location of the wall will be constructed according to the plan, with the seaward toe of the wall intersecting the beach where the present wall is. That is a very simple task for us to accomplish. That's our goal. There's nothing to be gained from a potential creep. So keep in mind, we're dealing with boulders. We won't be measuring with a micrometer, but the goal is clearly to put the wall where it belongs. I think I've spoken previously about the return at the end of the wall. I'll reiterate that return is a portion of the structure that is predominantly buried in the ground. It's not an exposed wall, and the purpose of that is when there's erosion from overtopping, the water tries to escape around the corner of the wall and the vegetation fails. And it's interesting to note how well that beach grass held up there. It's quite remarkable. But at any rate, that return on the wall, once it's exposed from erosion, then leads to preventing further damage to the wall. Was there a third part? Trees. I believe, I trust, our planting plan is very thorough and very detailed. I rely on Bill for his excellent work. We've worked together for decades. I don't think the intention is to carry it out according to plan.
We'll look at in deliberations anyway.
Well,
Conditions.
So I have one more question.
Go ahead.
And I'll let you answer it, but it's actually for Bill.
I'll
You
fake.
can look and he'll give you a yes or no.
I know a little bit of plant, about my wife's a plant
Are you dealing with the
pathologist.
invasives that are in front, well, to me, it's in front of the house. I guess you'd say in back of the house. Between the house and where you're working,
Yeah,
there are invasives there.
where it's disturbed, we're gonna
You're
replace
taking all
it
those. Yeah.
with Rose of Virginia rose, Carolina rose, rugosa rose, some oaks, some Pinus rigida, the stuff that's in there, beach grass and everything
Right,
else. There's some big trees in there that are gonna get cut down because it has to get in there. The trees that go back in would be smaller because we can't plant big trees in there and have them live. But they will grow over the years, maybe in 15, 20 years, if they grow. That might be a problem for you, but not at the moment, and it certainly wouldn't be better, it certainly would be a lot better now than your view through, I'm sorry, I'll say that again. The plants that will be planted there are gonna be smaller than the ones that are there now, because we cannot
Right.
plant big trees and have them
Right.
live there. Does that make sense?
No, because you said they would grow and eventually be taller, so
They'll be,
they're taller and they won't be small, obviously they'll be small and grow.
It's, would be very unlikely to encounter a very mature, large tree in conditions such as this. Trees in wind-blown, high salt, high submergence areas are very stunted, and it's very difficult to get them to grow at all. So I think it's an ambitious task to put trees out there that I think in 15 years we'll actually find that they're more akin to sort of a dwarf tree. So I understand the concern about blocking views. The reality of it is the conditions are exactly contrary to that. It means that they'll be constantly doused in salt spray, they'll be subject to high wind, they'll be subject to drought conditions. They're very harsh conditions to make any new tree grow. So they do, when you're able to make them take hold and start to establish, they do grow, but they grow in a very stunted fashion. There's presently trees there. We have a responsibility to do the best we can to replace those trees in kind. Our goal is to have the site as it is now when we leave or improved. So we're taking trees out, we're putting trees back. It's effectively a net zero.
Any other public comments? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. We're gonna vote on these individually. It'll all be the same vote, but they have to be done separate properties. So first one we'll take is 46. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of closing the hearing, take it under advisement, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None.
I'll make a motion to close the hearing on number 50 and take it under advisement.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for number 50. All those in favor of closing the hearing, take it under advisement, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Number 54.
I'll make a motion to close the hearing, take it under advisement.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of closing the hearing, take it under advisement, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Next up, Town of Falmouth, care of Chuck Martinson, within Eel River Estuary, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to obtain permits for 3 growing areas with the intent of allowing Falmouth residents to operate at the sites.
Good evening.
Mr. Staub?
I'm not Chuck Martinson.
No.
Peter Johnson Staub, Assistant Town Manager. Chuck will be handling all of the heavy lifting on this application, but I just wanted to offer some introductory remarks, if I may. And that is just to speak about the process and how this fits into the goals of the Board of Selectmen and the town's comprehensive wastewater management plan. I believe the Commission is aware that the town's comprehensive wastewater management plan to improve the quality of the estuaries by removing nitrogen relies very heavily on sewering, but we are endeavoring to minimize the footprint of the sewers and to minimize the cost to the ratepayers and the taxpayers by pursuing as many alternatives as we can. One of those is increased aquaculture and increased shellfish. So this application that's before you today for these 3 half-acre sites is the first of a program that we hope to expand on in the years ahead to promote aquaculture within the estuaries. The Commission, I'm sure, is aware that we have a number of existing aquaculture permits outside of the estuaries. This is fairly unusual to be pursuing them within, and the town, the Board of Selectmen, and the Shellfish Warden and the MES Department are all keenly aware of the competing uses within the estuaries. These are really high-value areas that are enjoyed for boating and swimming, and they're also important for recreational shellfish diggers, recreational shellfish folks, as well as commercial shellfishing. So we have had a fairly extensive process to look at all of the estuaries and places where aquaculture might be suitable, and we've identified some general areas in a draft rotational aquaculture plan, and then we're drilling down and looking at the sites in a more detailed fashion as we get to the permitting phase. So Chuck will speak in detail about the surveys that were done here, but these 3 sites were selected because we feel that they do not present conflicts in terms of boating and swimming and wild harvest shellfish activities. So I think that's pretty much it. There was a lot of public input to get to this point. It started with a working group that was open to the public. We had 10, 20 people attending those meetings, developing the filtering mechanism, the evaluation mechanism that we use to identify the broader sites. And then the Shellfish Advisory Committee was appointed. The Shellfish Advisory Committee has looked at this site as well. So I know you'll hold all your difficult questions for Chuck, but I just wanted to put this request in that context. Certainly, if you have any questions about anything that I've commented on, I'm happy to take them.
Mr. Chairman, just one thing, this project doesn't have a DEP number
I can't
assigned to
hear
it
you.
yet. Oh, sorry. This project doesn't have a DEP number assigned to it yet, so we will have to continue it. Okay, but I knew the board was prepared, and I knew Chuck was prepared, so I felt it was appropriate to go forward.
Thank you. Speaking up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Chuck Martinson. I'm the Deputy Director of Marine and Environmental Services and the Shellfish Constable as well. Just give me one moment. I'll pull up my presentation.
Jamie. Is that microphone supposed to work for us? Is that microphone supposed to project for us?
Yeah.
Is it turned up? Do you know if the microphone's supposed to work for us?
Only if they like,
Dial that controls the audio from the room.
Okay, because it's hard to hear people up there.
Up here?
Yeah.
Okay. I just turned it up.
Is that
I don't think I
any better?
How's the temperature? Is the temperature too cold?
It's-
No, seriously. Is it?
No, the last time they made it,
I'm up here, leave it cool.
the
Come on.
last time they, the
It's a
last
board I
time
gotta
they
deal
took
with.
it down, it got too hot.
You have control, that's my point, and we'll shut off at 8 o'clock. But you can turn it back on. That's a threat.
Plugs in again.
Yeah.
The hook comes out and I get pulled off.
Can we rely on that? It's the important things.
Feel free to turn it on. If it shuts down and you're uncomfortable, just turn it back on.
Moving on.
All right. Thank you all so much. My name's Chuck Martinson. I'm the, as I said, the Deputy Director of Marine and Environmental Services for Falmouth and the Shellfish Constable as well. If I could just approach first with the certified mail certificates. Let's go to. Before I get started, I would just like to point out this evening Tom Duncan is with us from the Water Quality Management Committee, and also Pete Chase, who's the chairman of the Shellfish Advisory Committee as well, should we have any further questions as I go along. Let me just see the advancer here. So a lot of the stuff that, a lot of my stuff from the beginning, Pete covered, or Peter Johnson Staub covered. I'm going to go pretty quick through this stuff. Initially, just because I think there needs to be some background, so we're all kind of starting from the same place. So the town looked at a number of alternatives to sewering. One of these alternatives that kind of rose to the top was shellfish. I think what's important is that shellfish isn't the magic bullet. It's not going to solve all our problems. It's one opportunity which could help a small percentage of our problem, but really where we see we get a lot of benefit from shellfish is in the areas that are overly affected by nutrients so much that they might not be able to get numbers just from sewering, or in some cases we have some areas that are, we call them the low-hanging fruit, areas that just shellfish could do it. But a lot of the stuff in the middle, it's not gonna be the only thing. It's certainly a part of what we're looking at, but it's not the major contributor to the nitrogen reduction. So the town developed some of our own aquaculture growing methods. These have been permitted through the board here, one of which is in Little Pond. We've done quite a bit of work over there looking at different setups, different ways to use gear and not injure shellfish bottom, and we've kind of rolled that into the work that we've done. So initially, as was mentioned, there was a shellfish working group, which was a somewhat loosely put together group appointed by the town manager's department. After that, Jen was part of that. Jen attended a number of meetings, so staff was involved with that from the start. There were meetings with homeowners, regulatory boards, federal and state, local stakeholders. That was voluminous, the amount of people we met with. That resulted in us having a draft aquaculture plan, which basically gave us some parameters to work around. It gave us kind of a goal to look forward to, but it was not finalized, and we're starting to work through that next process of identifying and finalizing our work there. Town meeting passed an article to assist with the implementation of sections of that draft aquaculture plan, and we've been bringing that aquaculture plan and parts of it from the draft form to final form. Board of Selectmen ultimately reorganized the Shellfish Working Group and appointed a full-time Shellfish Advisory Committee. Continued our public meetings. We worked in conjunction with the Water Quality Management Committee to kind of fuse both of our interests and see where they aligned. And as we proceeded along, we had addressed target nitrogen removal as part of the Water Quality Management Committee's requirements. WQMC is preparing a comprehensive wastewater management plan, and there's a notice of project change in there. And on that notice of project change, there's an 8-page section which documents and provides the explanation about how nitrogen reduction is measured in shellfish. So if there's any questions on that, I'd be happy to kind of go into that further. That's where that information is held. I don't claim to be an expert on that end of it. However, I'd be happy to put anyone in touch with someone who is. So why did we choose Eel River, for Eel River East in particular? It's designated as an open shellfish growing area. That means that it's available or open to the taking of shellfish or harvesting of shellfish throughout the year. There's not a time period when it's contaminated. They have, the area that we initially looked at, we believed was devoid of any standing crop. We went out and actually did a survey. A lot of the information that we gathered looking at these areas was gathered through working with the shell fishermen, working with local residents, working with people that are in the area. So we didn't really have a chance to actually go out and hard ground truth those areas. So as we moved along, we actually found that that site, the first set of sites, was not feasible. There was soft shell clams in those areas. They ultimately would not be available, and we felt that there would be problems from a resource perspective permitting those areas. There were 3 more sites which were located. They were located a distance from shore. These areas, which I'll pull up in the map in a little while here, they're characterized by soft, mucky bottom, anoxic bottom. These sites, we were looking at these sites to be trial sites for how nitrogen reduction-based shellfish farming could work as part of a larger alternative to addressing nitrogen reduction in the town. When we wanted to go out and look at these areas, our goal was to invest some time in some survey design work and how we wanted to survey these areas. I will, and I don't want to speak for Jen, but I'll say, at least from my perspective, I've looked at a lot of shellfish surveys over the years. I haven't seen probably a more stringent shellfish survey, certainly not in Falmouth, maybe even on Cape Cod. Not only was it stringent, but I think it was comprehensive is really the best word to use for it. There were a total of 48 sample locations per each survey site, which yielded 144 samples in each site for a total of 432 sample cores. And I'm going to show a video in a few minutes here just to show you the process that we went through so you have a good understanding of how we went out and we sampled these areas. Thinking that one of the larger concerns would be that, there is resource there. Why are we putting in a farm there? We were able to really identify and document, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. The equivalent area was 172.8 cubic feet of sampled substrate. So we'll talk about the areas first off. We've identified area 1, which we'll call area 1. Oh, okay. Thank you. This area right here would be area number 1, or site A, or 1A and 1B. This would be site 2 right here, and this down here would be site 3. Just for kind of edification purposes, this is Eel River West, this is Eel Pond, this is Eel River East. Sepit River is up here, and Childs River goes up and along here. As you'll see, there's not a lot of boat moorings that are in that area. That area does have some beach access points where people will go laterally to shore. We've taken that into consideration when drafting this, and we've left a 60-foot breezeway for boats to travel in and out of that area. We don't want to call them channels because they're not truly channels, but boats can go through those areas. Certainly any boat that would be up on the shore there would not have a beam larger than 60 feet. It would probably be like a 10-foot beam, so they could go in there. We also anticipate that people are going to be kind of interested in what's going on, so we want to leave some room for public access so that if they want to actually see what's happening, they're more than welcome to come and have a look. These are the sites broken down a little bit more. There's site A, site B, site C, and just a couple additional photos that show how they fit in there. As you can see in some of these other photos, so here you actually have boat traffic that's using the channel with the sites overlaid over it in this area right here. This is a boat actually underway. It's traveling down the system when that Google photo was taken, and then we superimposed these areas over it. So as far as the surveys, there were sample surveys, did a center and then 20-foot squares within the grid. We had a platform, and basically this platform, and I can explain this and go through this stuff, but the video is going to kind of summarize all this very quickly for you. But this represents, over here, this represents our platform that we used, and most of our samples were taken from site A, B, and C on the platform. And when we play the video, you're going to see some coring that takes place. The core is plunged down into the sediment and gets a full grab at those locations. This shows ultimately how when you come down one side, we set it up on the grid. We basically brought all this to the conservation staff, circulated this through state, local, federal agencies, asked if they had any input, and they all agreed that this was a pretty good way to capture what there was there for standing crop. One of the things that I also wanted to point out, and one of the benefits of this, is that when we went and we approached the Underwater Archaeological Board, they actually asked to see all of our photos because they said from the photos and the cores that we have, they could determine if there were any archaeological, kind of sites or areas of concern in that area. So not only did it inform the biological perspective of what's going on, but it also kind of informed the historical perspective of what's happening there. So initially the cores, they can hold up to 16 inches. When you plunge the cores in the ground, they can go anywhere from 18 to 24 inches. If you think of that bottom, it's really soft, so you can compact it together. And when it's compacted, it's capped at the top and the whole core comes out. So I'm gonna play this and I'll narrate kind of what's happening as it goes through. This is at I believe this is site C. So essentially what happens is these are our two anchors which go in the ground. Can everyone see this? I don't know if you can, it's two anchors go in the ground. This is the surveying tool that we use. This survey tool, it's pushed into the ground here and you'll see the water shoot out of the top of it in a minute. And what it's doing is it's grabbing that substrate that's down below. There's basically a stopper cap that's put in the end here. And at this point, we're lifting the core on out. And these markers on the side over here, this area, these mark our individual transects, so we know exactly where we are when we line those up. That's the core as it comes out. And so what happens is that core goes on a boat, and the boat travels over to the survey processing raft. Basically what happens on the raft, and you'll see this in a moment when we get over here, initially there's a photo of the core taken when it comes in, before anything's done to it, and then it's washed out, and it's actually cut in half, and then the second photo is taken, and then a third photo is taken after it's been washed out. You'll see our photo stand here. So basically every single core, we've been able to document exactly what's in there for animals.
No arrowheads?
I'm sorry?
Any arrowheads?
No arrowheads, no. It's a lot of, we weren't coming up with much of that type of debris, which I think you would find that in. There are areas where you would find arrowheads, and the other material wasn't there that you would find. So this is the wash down. This is the processing station. Ultimately, it's Christina who works with us on top. Basically, each sample is assigned a number. And it comes across the top, photos taken, it's documented. If anyone's interested in seeing any of the documentations from any of these core samples, we have photos of everything. We just didn't want to print, 500 and whatever it is times 3 photos. There'd be no ink left in our printer. I think from our perspective, as we move forward, this is the type of model that we'd like to use to go ahead and survey areas. I think that it's certainly more comprehensive than really any other work that's been done. So we're going to talk, I'm just going to jump off this for a minute here. So this is essentially a core before and post-processing. You can see in this core there was a quahog, a little bit of scallop debris. So just some of the larger results for all the sites. There was a total of 48 locations that were sampled, and in all of those locations, a total of 9 mature adult quahogs were found. 1 ribbed mussel, and then 66 stout razor clams. You might not find this as exciting as I do, but I was super happy to find these guys. And the reason is we've had shellfish surveys that have been going on for years, and not a single one of them's come up with a stout razor clam. And we came out with stout razors. We were excited to see them there. So not only did we remove them, but we sent them out for spawning at Roger Williams because they've been trying to spawn them there as well. And we're hoping that in the future that might be a resource that we could use in some of our extremely anoxic areas. If these animals are able to make it in that stuff, they can make it anywhere. There is a market for them as well. The other thing that we found, which also excited me, was a coastal mud shrimp.
I know.
We sent this to,
I was hoping you would
Having
show
dinner.
it.
yeah, we sent this to Betsy. It was really neat. I mean, all
A
these
meeting.
years we've been doing
It was in-
shellfish surveys and we
it was
haven't
in
seen
town
these things,
meeting.
and
It got to
now
us.
we're finding them. So I think it speaks to just the work that Jen, the background of the work that Jen provided us with to just let us know how we could better our survey work. And yeah, so here we are. We get caught up in these little fun things, but I enjoy them. A little bit about the aquaculture farm design. So the bags will be secured in rows on the farm, and the farm will be anchored in place by a telescoping auger system. And all off-site work floats will be held by helical anchors. This is just a quick overview of the rows and how they'll look. They're very similar to the systems that we had in Little Pond, with the only exception is the helix moves in and out of a sleeve. And we'll talk about the sleeving system here. So when we did a lot of the work in Little Pond, we found that there were a few things that happened. When we had wind events, our initial setup was with cinder blocks, and those cinder blocks would drag a little bit and reposition in heavy winds. So what we did is we went out and we buried pipes in the ground, and we found a couple things. We needed a much smaller footprint to have our farms, but also those farms, they stayed static. They didn't move no matter what, no matter the wind, no matter the tide, whatever happened. As that was developed, we worked with an independent contractor that we work with through the town, and they were able to help us design that same system, but use that system in a little bit deeper water. So essentially what you're looking here is, this is the sleeve which goes into the ground, and it's basically screwed in. And this is ultimately it's almost like a piston that goes up and down with the tide. And, oops, sorry about that. So, when they're joined together, that ball floats up and down inside that piston, and there's all the activity that takes place in that small section. And so that would be the plan, to use this similar setup. It also benefits us because we know exactly where we're putting our gear in, right down to the inch, unlike having cinder blocks in there or other forms, anchors, and other things that drag. And frankly, from a aesthetic perspective, they look so much nicer to have squared, 4 square corners on a farm. They don't look, kind of ragtag. They look very professional. A few other things. The shellfish would not be allowed in the water prior to March 1st. They would need to be removed by January 1st. That's what we would hope for. Overwintered shellfish will take place off-site. There'll be a storm plan in place in order to remove the bags from the farm, no different than any other farm. No shellfish activity will take place on any of the shores of Washburn Island. That's something that certainly we would absolutely want the Commission to go ahead and condition in the future, if they would condition that, just because we don't want activity on that island. They're our neighbors, and we don't want to do business in their yard. The growers would be required to weigh in and weigh out. And what this essentially means is that you need to think of this shellfish setup not as just for growing shellfish, but primarily for our purposes for addressing nitrogen reduction. So every bit of shellfish that's removed from there needs to be weighed. And that's really something that's unique to this farm than any other farm. And there's a couple of ways that we have for identifying the measurements and the weights. There's coinciding reporting things, reporting information that must go forward with the state, which would also be reported back to us so that we can match that up. There's actually some benefit in there. If the growers exceed the weights that we'd like, then they could actually potentially make more money, just because, and we would ultimately have a greater nitrogen reduction level. So they seem to kind of go well. The town also will be providing some under a fee, some specific items, one of which will be overwintering containers, work floats, guidance and anchoring, and those setups, and a few other items, which will ultimately assist the growers in their reaching the goals that we're setting forward. A lot of this gear is gear that we used initially in our test sites that we've identified could help further this project and other projects in the future. What's critical about that piece, and I don't want to get too far into it because I really don't think that it results back in the wetland bylaw or the state law, but there will be some funds that would be collected for this under the fee, and that money would be used to ultimately grow shellfish, hopefully in areas where private aquaculture could not take place. So we would use municipal aquaculture in some of these other locations, which ultimately would be for public harvest. So there truly is kind of a benefit there for the town and for the wild growers as well. I know I went through that rather quickly. I could spend all night up here, but I figured I'd hopefully give you a brief overview.
We don't want to be here all night.
No, I was gonna get cut off, I thought at 8, but I'm still up here, so.
Excellent presentation.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you.
Chuck, did you see DMF's new letter that they issued yesterday?
I have one, yes, is that
The one they submitted, I got it by email
from
yesterday.
on the 9th?
Yes.
Yeah, I just saw I just got back into town, I have a copy of it here.
Oh, no, I just want to make sure that you saw it.
Yep.
Okay, that's it.
And the board obviously has a copy of that.
Yeah, we have a copy of it, correct.
Yep. I have
That was it. I've met with Chuck a few times on this. We were given a kind of basically a mini presentation the other day. So I do not have any questions. Brendan?
No questions.
Okay, thank you.
You know, we work with them to develop the survey methodology. Mark worked on that, so we were comfortable with that.
Mark?
So the town is going to have a contractor who by bid, I presume, gets the right to put in this system, is that right?
There'd be three separate, we would be
Three
hoping for
separate contractors
three
on
separate
three sites.
contractors, correct.
Do those poles come out in the winter?
They could come out, or as far as the sleeves on the bottom or the poles themselves?
The sleeves which are,
There are two options. One option would be to leave the sleeve in and just drop the pole to the bottom. We would like to do that. There would be no traffic issues, boat traffic issues,
why not?
because they would be on the bottom. They could be on the bottom, all the way on the bottom, flush with the bottom.
I mean,
The only reason they float is because there's a polyball on top of them. So if you were to remove that polyball, the only thing that's exposed is a small horse collar, and they go flush to the bottom.
So the outer pole goes all the way flush to the bottom?
Yeah, so what happens is if this is the pole, and
That's the
using my
pole that
hands,
has the auger
this is
on
your
it.
sleeve, it comes in and out because there's a ball on top, which is attached to a main line. If that ball is removed, this whole system slides to the bottom, it's flush with the bottom.
So the pole, the bottom of that outer tube is sitting on the bottom.
Sitting on the bottom,
No
correct.
boat's gonna run into it.
No boat's gonna run into it, nope, no. So it's, there's two ways to handle that. One way would be to go down and cap it, and then just put a new one in, but or remove the sleeve, I guess you could do that, but I think you would probably do more damage if you remove the sleeve.
Mark, I would prefer the
Just leave the sleeve there and just, the best way to really do it, I think, would be leave the sleeve in place, leave the, we'll call it, for lack of a better term, the piston in place, remove the ball and just have it sit flush on the bottom. And then there would be, the only thing that would need to happen, go down there, tag line it up, and go ahead and attach that piston, and it could float up.
Thank you.
Sure.
I have a comment first. This is well thought out. I had a number of concerns that you have addressed them. But a couple of questions. To float the polyballs.
Yep.
What color will they be?
They have to be, per state law, they have to be yellow. The corners have to be yellow. Now, any other ones, we can work with the color on that.
Okay.
Per state law, they have to be yellow, though.
And if the program is discontinued
Yes.
after a number of years.
Sure.
Is there provision that all the hardware will be removed?
Absolutely, it would need to be removed, and that's, I don't know, do you wanna- Yeah, we can address that, condition that in the license. Yep.
Okay, no further.
I think that's a great point. But if they wanted to leave the gear for me, I'd be happy to use it. I have a lot of gear float up in Buzzards Bay that I get blamed for. It's not our gear, but I use it.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I had the opportunity to go to one of the hearings and the concerns of the commercial fishermen in the area, and you've clearly addressed that. These core samples, there's nothing there. There's no reason for anyone to object to it. But they're how far away from Washburn?
Sure. So I can pull up, would you like me to pull up a photo? I roughly, I'd say, when I get you some exact measurements
No,
off
that's-
each
no,
end,
no,
I'd
no.
say roughly, 75 yards.
75. That's far enough.
Plenty of room for
Yeah.
boats to go around.
Boats, yeah, so the goal was to have boats be able to go inside. We do understand people go in there. We didn't want to stop people from accessing the island.
You're 60 foot, I won't go in there, sorry.
No, we have a lot of venturous people that
Sure.
spend evenings on Washburn Island.
Yep.
And they could wander out and visit the beds. but
Sure. Yeah, so
75
it would
yards
be
is
tough.
far
What-
enough away.
What would be tough for them to wander out and visit the beds? The only way that they could really do that would be with a boat. They could not walk out there, and the reason is because the bottom is so anoxic.
Oh, yeah.
They would literally sink. They could swim out there, certainly. But it would be very limited to go out there and, you know, if you had a pair of chest waders on, there's no way you could walk to it.
Right.
You would sink just in that really soft mud,
Yeah.
very deep. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Russ,
No questions.
very informative, thank you. Betsy?
So I have a question.
Sure.
First of all, I have no question about your part of the project, and I think I think it'll be interesting. But your part of the project, I have, so if you're measuring in and out, right, you start with little ones, and then you get bigger ones, you know the weight, and then you have
Sure.
something that says this is much as meat, this much is shell.
Do you want to talk you through that, how we got to that or not? I can, if you'd like.
Well, no, well, actually, I'd like to see,
Sure.
we don't have to talk about it, but I'd like to see that section.
Sure, absolutely.
But my other question is, are you doing any upstream, downstream nutrient measurement? Are you actually saying this much is being taken from the water body?
Yeah, I guess I can address that with what's been done today. Evening, I'm Tom Duncan, I'm a member of the Water Quality Management Committee here in town. To address the actual nitrogen removal, there's a lot of data out there, and there's a lot of noise in it, but we've been very careful over the last couple years to use shellfish grown here in Falmouth. They're analyzed at Boston University, and so we have very, very good numbers for in situ production of shellfish here. So we have a very good idea what's going on there. We know the percent of nitrogen by the tissue of the animal and also in the shell. There's a fair amount of nitrogen that's sequestered in the shell also. Brian Howes at UMass Dartmouth has been doing measurements for a number of years, both in Little Pond and most recently in Bourne's Pond, of upstream and downstream measurements of nitrogen changes, also changes in chlorophyll concentrations also, which of course are directly related to the nitrogen that we're starting with. And they do see small scale right in the immediate vicinity of the oyster bags, whether we're looking at racks on the bottom or suspended in mid-column or surface culture, which this project will be. So the numbers are being done. There's a fair amount of noise, but the best thing we can do is by knowing the weight of the oysters going into the project and knowing the gross mass of the oysters coming out of the project. And each grower has to submit 25 oysters each growing season that the town is going to select. That's going to be the basis for the measurement, the actual removal of nitrogen. So I don't know, does that pretty
Well,
much?
that answers it completely. I mean, when Chuck
Yeah.
was first starting, I said, I wrote down, well, how are you gonna do this? This is gonna be an upstream, downstream, which I've done lots of upstream, downstream
right.
stuff, and there's lots
There's lots of
There's
noise.
lots that goes into it, right?
Let's call it turbulence.
But- Yeah, but as soon as Chuck said you're gonna have measure in and out, I said,
Yep.
well, they must have better measurements than the last time I heard a discussion, which was 10 years ago.
Right now, and we're doing the best work that I know that's being done in this field right now. I mean, these are right here, we're not taking numbers even from someplace else on the Cape. We're doing the numbers right here, and we're gonna know exactly what's being removed that season in that area. And I guess that's all I've got to say unless people.
Yeah, no, that was that's,
Thank you.
you
Just
answered it,
add-
and
if I
I'd
could
love to
just-
see those 8
Sure.
pages.
Yeah, so I'll just add to that real quick. So there's the up-down that Dr. House is doing, which is, he's still working on. Science Wares has been working with us to do the weigh-in and weigh-out method, that part. And then there's a third piece, which we're working on with Huey and Stonehill, which we were funded for, and has been permitted through this board as well, which is basically how the gear affects the substrate underneath the gear itself. So it's really kind of 3 things that are happening. So it's not just focused on one. And then I think the last thing that I'd want to point out is simple. We have some amazing photos of what this stuff looks like up and downstream of it, and the water clarity is something that we can speak for.
Well, that's
There-
interesting,
you know,
yeah.
from a very elementary, just look at the water, on an outgoing tide below the systems, and the clarity is significantly different.
Good, thanks Chuck. And Tom. And you.
No, I just think it's an exciting project, and I think the town will benefit from it, definitely.
Courtney?
Good project.
Continuance.
Oh,
So the only thing we need is a DEP number.
Yes.
Chuck, she mailed that out today? Do you
I
know?
believe she did. I
She did?
spoke with her very late today.
Yep.
So, I mean, if we have to be more conservative and go a little further, that's okay.
I'm just trying to think of something. July 31st?
At the request of the applicant, make a motion to continue this to July for
Is that something
July
you require that it be added?
31st.
Second.
I will let you know. If DEP doesn't have any comments or questions and issues the number, you don't have to attend.
Okay.
We'll continue the hearing for the issuance of the DEP number only.
Great, thank you.
And we don't meet the 24th, and they won't have the number by the 17th.
Okay.
So the 31st that'll be our goal.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Chuck.
Do we have anybody from the public that would like to comment?
Did anybody
Okay,
second
so
my
we have a,
motion? I made a motion, did anybody second it?
I wrote it down.
Oh, who seconded it?
Courtney.
Oh,
I did.
We have a motion and a second to continue until July 31st. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you all.
Good job, Chuck. Did you learn something?
12 Seabrook Drive has been continued. Next up, Anthony Newman Senior, trustee, 45 Childs River Road, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to install a new pool, apron, fence, all associated clearing, excavating, grading, filling, and landscaping.
When was this continued to? Seabrook? It's continued to when?
Seabrook was.
Till when?
Hold on. I didn't write, oh, wait a minute, I wrote it on the phone.
7/17, May. 7/17.
7/17.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members, and staff. For the record, my name is Jack Landers Colley. I'm a civil engineer in private practice. And I've been retained by Anthony and his wife to prepare the plan that's before you this evening. I'd start by describing the site. If you've been to the property, I think your first impression is, at least it was mine the first time I was there, is it's extraordinary. It's very well landscaped, it's meticulous, it's a beautiful piece of property, and I've been told that it's had an honorable mention in one of the landscape digests, I'm not sure which. Having said that, what Anthony and his wife would like to do is make additional use of this property by proposing a pool. The lot is identified as 77. It's approximately 30,500 square feet in size. It's rectangular in shape, as you can see, approximately 200 feet wide and about 150 feet deep. Starting from Charles River Road, which runs south to north, there's a, I'm still learning the system, bear with me. There is a driveway right here that goes into a garage. This is an existing house. I'm still old school, so I brought a plan with me on the chance I might make a mistake with the electronic file. There's a house that's depicted in this polyline. There is a series of decks starting by the front door that circumnavigate around around the house, come around, go down, and there's a little, I'll describe it as a gazebo here. There's also a riprap wall here. That riprap wall was to pick up the vertical difference in elevation between the upland side and the bottom side. It also happens to define the top of coastal bank by virtue of the slope. Starting from this point, it's heavily landscaped. We have identified in great detail the lawn area. What isn't lawn is, I think it's fair to say, landscaped with some type of cultivated plantings. Along the shoreline, there tends to be plants suitable for that habitat, same over here. And further west, there's an existing walkway, I'll call it dock, that runs parallel to the riprap, and then it goes out to a float system. I've had the benefit of working on this property for over 20 years. It was originally, when I first came to this site, it was in 1999 for Dr. and Mrs. Nailbuff. At that time, what I can tell you is the house is the same shape now as it was then, and this portion of the decks were the same. I believe the gazebo was a deck, not in the present not the present style, but same location. And one of the reasons we were hired is they had a failed septic system, so we know that there's a tank with a pump chamber, even though it's not shown there, in the back that goes up through a force main, and there's a soil absorption system in this area. The purpose of explaining all that is if you were to look at the pictures that accompany the notice of intent, there's really one location to put or propose a pool. And those pictures, which should be part of the notice, will show that a majority of this area is changed in the sense that it's mulch, it's cultivated plantings. We show a hedge here, and we depict in this area that in everything to the north and east is indigenous plants. There's a couple American hollies over here that based on our proposed project, would have to be removed. The staff and I talked, and quite frankly, and the reason I'm going in this direction is, I interpreted the mitigation requirements for the construction of the pool and the apron entirely different than them, and I'd like to take that point and put it aside. The reason I say that is, I wanted to look at the other merits of the project, make sure there weren't issues with this board about that part, and then if it's a matter of calculating the mitigation according to the staff, we'll go about doing that mitigation, and as a result, we would ask for a continuance in order to resolve that issue. We proposed the pool here because the top of the bank's over here. We wanted to be as far away as we could, which in a minimum of 25 feet because of the A and B buffer requirements. In addition to that, I met with the building department, and the head of the department said because it's a principal structure, we have to be at least 25 feet from the road layout. And because it's a principal structure, or I should say a structure pertinent to a principal structure, we have to be at least 10 feet away from the property line. So having said all that, this is the only place we can realistically put the pool and have it function as a pool for a family. What I mean by that is you wouldn't want to put a pool here. It's higher up. There's no obstruction at all from the public going by, and this is heavily landscaped. If, again, you make reference, you'll see that this is basically a mulch base with cultivated plantings. There's a generator and there's a AC unit here. In addition to that, we're about 100 feet from the edge of the pool to the top of the riprap. So, again, what we're trying to do is keep in compliance as best we can with the resource areas, buffers, that is the A and B zone as required by the commission. And again, we're of the opinion this is the best place to put a pool. What I did is, now talking about the calculations, what I did is we took the area that was not altered in its indigenous habitat, came up with an area of 153 or 158 square feet, and what we did is we mitigated at a 2-to-1 ratio for that. Whether it be right or wrong, that's at least what we did, and we showed proposed mitigation down here. Since then, like I said, I talked to the staff. They have a different opinion. I'd like to have a conversation with them about that and see if we can meet our goals and their goals at the same time. So that's the project. If you have some questions other than the square footage mitigation calculations, I'd be happy to answer them.
That's,
Jack, I know you don't want to talk about the mitigation calculations, but we're going to have to talk about them, okay? Maybe not in this board, if you want to do a continuance and meet with the staff, and we can explain to you why we feel we're right, okay? Be happy to do that. I do have some other questions about your project.
Okay, go right ahead.
Okay. Do you have to go to zoning for this? Because the pool is,
Say that again?
do you have to go to zoning?
No, because we're greater than 25 feet away from the front yard, from
Okay, so
the
they
road
do
layout.
allow, okay, all right, that's fine, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I met with the building commissioner on that, and he agreed.
Okay, and how many trees are you taking out to construct the pool?
There'll be 2 American hollies to be removed. And they would be right in this area.
Okay, Jack, we might have to meet on site, because I think I counted
Yeah.
a few more trees.
Well, I think the way this conversation's going to go, or the way that I see it going, is we are gonna modify the pool.
Okay.
And that's something that I thought the staff and I should
Yeah,
discuss.
And that's fine, well, we'd be happy to meet. And we might have to modify the pool then. Now, are you gonna, and I was trying to figure this out in the field, are you gonna drop the grade? You're not bringing in fill. So when you construct the pool, where your hollies are and where your little hash marks is, where your naturally vegetated area is, that's a slope. So you're gonna have to cut into that slope to even off where the pool is, are you gonna need a retaining wall over there of some sort?
I do believe we're going to need a short wall. By short, I mean less than 30 inches in height.
Okay, you need
That-
to put that on the plan.
I understand.
Okay. Because I'm like, I was looking at it, I was like,
There-
you're going
there-
to need something there.
There is a short wall here already. That's what this
No, I know that,
symbol
but that,
is.
that
And
wall's
what-
gonna
yeah.
go away.
And what we're gonna do, or what we thought of doing, is taking that and just wrapping it around here.
Okay, so we're gonna have to, once if you decide that you're going to need to reconfigure your pool, we're gonna have to decide where that retaining wall is gonna be, and it's going to have to be shown on the plan, okay?
Right.
Okay. Zoning, retaining wall, trees, and out in the field, we kind of figured your construction access would be different. So you're going in the main driveway and
Right.
coming around the house.
There's two approaches they can take. They can come in this way, and this exists right here. This is parking area.
Yep.
I'm not sure if assuming that the pool does get approved and it's in this location, I'm thinking one of two things will happen. The first is they'll bring a concrete truck with a pumping unit, and they'll just park the pumper here and literally pump it over into this area. Or the pool contractor, sometimes they'll use a gunite system where they'll actually have the truck and the vessel that, for the gunite, and they'll hose it and they'll actually spray it in this form.
If you go the concrete route, Jack, you're gonna have another construction access through all that natural vegetation, so that's gonna have to be shown too. Pretty heavily vegetated where that little parking area is.
It is right in this area,
Yeah.
and if they do use a pumper, the pumper will actually lift itself over. They actually have this articulating arm that goes over.
Okay.
Or they're going to have to
Good.
come through
Russell
here.
and Jamie
But-
said they can do it. All right. I don't know, so I've never seen a big pumping truck, so.
Well, it's not a particularly large pool, so it shouldn't be
It's
that
really
difficult.
not. Okay. And we won't talk about the mitigation. We can do
Yeah,
that.
well-
We can do that one-on-one, okay? But yeah, my major question besides the mitigation was, the access and whether or not you were gonna need that retaining wall.
Absolutely.
Okay? That's it, Mr. Chairman? Besides the mitigation, which Jack and I have to handle
Okay.
later.
Russ, do you want to start? Steve?
I don't have any questions.
Peter?
No questions at this time.
Mark?
No questions.
Betsy?
I guess
on,
I'm not
Betsy.
allowed to
Come on,
talk about
Betsy.
No,
the
Betsy, you can
mitigation.
ask the
Come on, Betsy.
question.
Well, no, that's not it. I mean, if you have a specific species,
I don't have a species. If you have a lawn, that's pervious surface. If you're covering it with a pool that makes it impervious surface, it's impervious because it's gonna hold water, which means you have to mitigate for it. So I'll let you discuss the details with Jack.
I absolutely agree. If you're talking about impervious, they're apples and oranges. I agree with that. What I did is when I interpreted the regulations, I looked at redevelopment and degradation, and I applied it in a different way. Obviously, when I discussed it with the staff, they said something entirely different. I wasn't going to argue that point.
Which is how we've been consistent for
2008.
15 years, probably. Well, since 2008. And you see, you have other engineers in the back who are saying, ooh, is that the way to interpret it? But the answer
Well,
is no.
I
We like your creativity, but,
No, Jack, no.
I get it.
okay.
I get it.
But I don't have a
Covered.
problem. I don't have a
Covered.
problem with the pool here.
Right. I understand. It's strictly a mitigation issue. I understood that when I was talking to the staff.
Mitigation and
Got it.
retaining wall issue, Jack.
So we're all on the same page in that respect.
Good.
And,
Looking forward
Okay.
to seeing the revised plan.
exactly.
You good?
I'm good.
Kevin?
I'm gonna wait till I see a final plan. Is this stone wall going to?
Part of it's. gonna
There's an
happen.
existing wall there now.
Yeah.
Part of it's kind of,
Kind of just like that, but the wall starts right over here,
yeah.
goes along like that. Existing, it proposed pool is flat. That's the whole purpose of that short wall. And that's how I envision the north side of the pool would be. We will address the location of the pool and that retaining wall at the continued meeting, as well as the mitigation that goes with it. Fair enough.
Courtney?
My only comment is, Jack, it's unfortunate you don't get these things addressed ahead of time, so they don't have to be continued.
No, we try, we just didn't have the time.
Yeah, the staff was
Our-
good
our
enough to get it
schedules-
scheduled quickly, and then we had conflicts, and I
Yeah.
I mean,
understand.
it's just my
We
observation
tried.
is that we've seen a number of your projects come in front of us, and they seem to constantly get continued for one reason or another because things haven't been hashed out. So I'm just suggesting that you be a little more thorough when you come in the first time.
When are we continuing?
No, on the last one that Jack had, we met multiple times before they came in. It just changed a bit, and this one, like I said, the schedules just couldn't mesh up, but we'll figure it out, Courtney, okay?
Yeah. That's meant as a constructive comment, Jack. It's not.
Yeah, yeah, I
Jack, can
understand.
you do the 31st of July?
Certainly.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I know the 17th's fall, and I have no idea about the 24th.
we are
so-
not meeting on the 24th, that's why.
Okay.
So it'll give
It
you a
is
couple
what
of
it
weeks
is.
to meet with us, because I'm not in the office next week. So you
I
can meet with
understand
Brenda. So it'll give you some time to talk to your client. We could possibly meet Friday. And then you'll have some time to speak with your client, revise your plan, and get it in by the 24th, so they'll
Right.
have it a week ahead of time, okay?
No, I think that's fine, because we've missed the season anyway, so
Nope, that's fine.
we don't want to miss the next season, though.
Nope, we'll get it done.
Thank you very much.
So,
The request of the applicant,
July
I make
the
a
b-
motion to
yeah.
continue this to the 31st.
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any comments from the public? All
Thank
right.
you again.
All those in favor of continuing until 7:31, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you, Jack. Thank you for using the microphone.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was nice, wasn't it?
Beautiful place.
Next up, David and Mary Catherine Carey, 60 Siders Lane, Falmouth, Mass. For permission to construct 2 additions, attached garage, new driveway, install Title V septic system, planting, mitigation plantings, and all associated excavating, grading, and landscaping. Mr. Bunker.
Thank you for the record. Tom Wilson of Best Design, representing David and Mary Catherine Carey, 60 Sitters Lane. David Carey is here tonight. Whatever I can't answer, he can.
Ooh, that's a challenge.
Where are we? So the site we have is, it's another beautiful site, probably in a different way. It's right around the bend on Sitters Pond, on the other side of the St. Barnabas Church. You access it from Sitters Lane, which goes off of the village green. On the top of this plan, I have the existing conditions. Plan, let me see. So what we have here is Sitters Pond in the, on the west side? Or is it north arrow? No, the south side, that's it. Sitters Pond on the south side, obviously land under a water body. There is a bordering vegetated wetland along here, which was delineated by LEC. You have the wetland data sheets in the, what was submitted. And The pond and some of the upland area are in flood zone AE elevation 13, which runs along this line right here. Above that is flood zone shaded X for a little bit, and then above that, further landward is flood zone X, unshaded at X, which is not a flood hazard zone. So this slope here is steeper than 10 to 1, but less steep than 4 to 1. So the top of the coastal bank is coincident with the edge of the flood zone, which is the 13-foot contour through here. This is the top of the coastal bank. Have various setbacks, 50 feet from the BVW, 75 feet A zone, which of the pond, which seems to be pretty much coincident with the top of the coastal bank. And we have the B zones of those things. The A zone of the coastal bank is the furthest landward A zone. That's 50 feet up into here, and then 100 feet from the coastal bank reaches back and covers about half of the house, a little less than half of the house in this area right here. That's the furthest landward reach of the buffer zones. Has a septic system, which is 2 cesspools. They wanted to upgrade that. Have the limit of work drawn around here far enough to get to the cesspools, just for the purpose of abandoning, crushing them, filling them, and otherwise taking them out of service. What they're proposing to do, have on here, is to add what's colored in the reddish are the additions. So this is the existing house, kind of the brown color. So this addition, this L of the house, will actually be taken off and rebuilt. I think it's about 1.8 feet wider in this location, but not closer to the resource area. And then in this location, where the existing garage was right here, there's a little bit of new construction right here. This corner right here is the existing garage, so it does come a little bit closer to the resource areas, but it is within the B zone, and that's something that it can be, because it does not reach as far as the zone A. And probably the largest increase in impervious surface is the proposed patio, which is right here. Again, it's getting closer to the coastal bank. It's is that 71 feet there, I believe. Most of the addition is back this way, outside of all resource area buffers. And so none of that addition is counted toward any of the required mitigation. The septic system is going in here with a new tank, new SAS, again on the inland side of the house, further away obviously than the cesspools, which are not compliant with Title V. And the driveway will have a drainage pit, catch basin and a drainage pit, and some of these, the downspouts from the gutters will be connected into here. Other dry wells be connected to the gutters here and here. The existing house, I think, does have some dry wells, but it's not completely drained. So we have an increase of 224 square feet of coverage in Zone B, the 2-to-1 mitigation. We have this area right here as a natural native shrub planting, 448 square feet, with an area around here. I think there's an 8-foot radius to keep away from this maple tree that's right in this location. These areas are overgrown tangles of bittersweet, mainly bittersweet and other brush and vines, which They might come back at some time to do a removal project, but at this time, it's just staying as is, and we're just proposing the mitigation, which is in a Zone A, basically beginning at the top of the coastal bank and up in this location. So this, I said, it's in Zone B, some of it moves a little closer, but we have the proper mitigation proposed on this site, and drainage, roof drainage, and whatever else, septic upgrade, and I'll take any questions you have.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I went out to the site. I don't have any questions. It was pretty straightforward. Oh, the only thing, Tom, and this is something that Kevin picked up on, your mitigation plantings, how are you gonna protect them from all that bittersweet?
Well, I do have in the narrative that we probably have a little mowed path. I mean, if we have a mowed
Yeah.
path, we'll probably have to widen it somewhere else for, for the area that's taken out of that perhaps, but
Yeah.
I just have to be a little lawn, 2 foot wide path
I know
or
that's been
whatever.
done, but it's gonna have to be maintained, because that bittersweet will just come right over.
Yes, and he's very aware of all the bittersweet that's
Yeah.
there, and it's,
Yeah, it's,
Anybody that crosses through my yard, it's because that ancient way that's there.
yeah,
Very
Very
true.
much aware of it, and I do keep it passable for everything.
okay. That was it. That's the only question. Just, like I said, it's very straightforward.
Courtney,
No questions.
Kevin.
Good job.
Just a beautiful piece of property.
This would be a nice improvement for that. This is a typical project that you freshen up a house and you can improve the habitat.
Exactly.
Yeah, thanks.
Russ.
No questions, good problem.
Steve.
Definite improvement, thank you.
Peter.
Definite approval. I really like the fact that the cesspools are going to be replaced with Title V. Did you intend to remove any trees?
No.
Okay.
No, all of this, this addition and this part of the addition down here is where the garage is now. And it's all, the main part of the garage addition is in this existing paved driveway and lawn area there. Basically, no vegetation, no native vegetation that I know of, the trees is being removed.
No further questions.
Mark?
No questions.
Excellent.
Make a motion, close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Second.
Courtney first, sorry. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Close the hearing, take it under advisement. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, it's unanimous. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you, good luck, that'll be nice.
Town of Falmouth has been continued. Okay. Request to amend the order of conditions. James DeVellis, 22 Dusty Miller Road, Falmouth, Mass., for permission to replace existing wooden deck with a masonry terrace and install native shrubs.
Is it there?
Yeah. Do I have to keep track of who's here?
Yeah, it's an amendment.
Oh, it's amended?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay,
What did you think it was?
extension.
Oh. Yeah.
Thank you. Again, for the record, my name is Tom Bunker, BSS Design, representing Jim DeVellis. What you have in front of you on the screen now is the approved site plan, which is from last fall. The house is under construction. The landscape architect, Greg Billows and Associates, sent this plan, sent the next plan. Sent the plan to me where we have, there are basically two things going on. One, as far as that existing wooden deck, under which I found the, bottle cap artifacts. Had to put that in.
Yeah, well, as soon as I saw this plan, I said, I remember this.
Yeah, right. I didn't bring the town topo of that, though. I can't show you that one.
I remember it.
Yeah. So this wooden deck here, where is that? This wooden deck in the approval was allowed to remain in place and be, repaired, rebuilt. What they want to do now is, oops, get over there.
Sure.
And I believe Mr. Billows has spoken with your staff about this. This light blue area is a masonry platform, which will be put in place rather than the existing deck. So let me see. I believe actually it will be, there was some talk of possibility of erosion from under the deck. It is sandy there, and actually this will contain it, and that should be less likely to erode. There'll be a block wall. I'm not sure if some of this was, information was in the narrative, in the package that we gave you. I'm not sure how to find it. Let me see here. There's the existing deck there, two views of it. What they want to do, Greg supplied me with this as part of the narrative, there'd be a this type of interlocking block, retaining wall, not a tall wall, and then this railing, stainless steel railing system along three sides of that retaining wall in this location. And as he points out, this will be built with a pitch going back toward the lawn area, so that it will not drain toward the coastal bank, but it'll drain back toward the lawn area. And it is smaller than the existing deck. I didn't color it in, but this little part right here is called existing deck. There's 110 square feet of more shrubs will be planted in this location. The masonry deck will be 247 square feet, and the deck and the stairs. The deck is 314 plus the stairs, but this area right here will be replanted, so it'll be a net. There's actually a reduction of 67 square feet. The 110 square feet is because this is wider this way, so there's a little bit more here. But the reduction in coverage is 67 square feet from doing this work. The other change they would like to make is to reconfigure the pool and the pool terrace. So if you see this dashed line right here is the approved edge of the pool terrace. And so you see it's getting further from, a little bit further from that approved terrace came right from zone A here. And because it went that way, it's 2 feet or so away from the zone A. So it's a little further away from the resource area. And it, there we go. The permitted pool was 1,160 square feet. The proposed pool and terrace is 1,178 square feet. So that has an increase of 17 square feet in Zone B. There's overall a reduction in coverage of 50 square feet on the entire site. And really, all the reduction is in the Zone A, a small increase in Zone B. So there is a reduction in coverage, but we have not reduced, actually, we have increased the amount of native shrubs going on the site, because these two green areas here are the same as what was shown on the original plan. So the mitigation planting has not been removed because of the reduction in coverage. Plus, there's another 110 square feet of native shrubs going here. So there's actually a reduction in coverage and an increase in planting from this. The third part of this is it's shaded in red or traced in red here, the pool fence, which on the original plan, there was no pool enclosure fence shown. And so the landscape architect wants to put it down through, I think he said basically along the, what's that, the 29, 30-foot contour going down here. So it'll be below grade. All the work will be done by hand, digging the holes and putting the fence in. There will be temporary disturbance. That's quite a tangle of vines and brush through there. I'm sure it will regrow fairly quickly, and you'll not be able to see the fence, but it will serve its purpose for the building code purpose of keeping the pool safe. So those are the proposed changes we'd like to get approved for this site. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Two things. I have no problem with the terrace, Tom. Absolutely not. He does need to revise this, because on this it says pool and spa revision, net zero of increase in impervious, where we do have an increase in the impervious for the pool, if he's gonna break it out like he is. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, I just want that revised. And I'm a little concerned with the location of the pool fence. Usually the board likes to see it closer to the actual pool and not cutting through their buffer zone, especially their A buffer zone in this case. That said, you have a fairly large site, but the board does usually require those pool enclosures to be a little bit more contained. But they can decide what they'd like to do. You have a fairly large site, so that's the one thing that might save you on this. But I don't like the fact that that pool enclosure cuts through that A buffer. Okay, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, all I can say, obviously your standards are that it be lifted above, so
No, I understand that it's required by the
Yeah.
building code for the pool, which is why we're saying usually we see them closer to the actual
Right.
pool structure and not wrapping around the entire yard. Because then the board does like to see them raised, but you can't for code, so, you might either shrink that pool fence, find another configuration for it, but again, I don't particularly like it cutting through, although it's invasive, and I get it, but it's naturally vegetated A buffer. Okay?
yeah.
How high above grade is this proposed masonry structure?
It is, the grade up there is 34, and the 34 in the lawn, right there. Let's see if I can.
So that won't help you with the fence?
34, the grade drops down at the, across the limit of work right through here, it's at 30, so it's,
No, actually, it might.
the base of that is basically 4 feet high just on the downhill side of that patio area. So, if at least it could go down there, there is that stainless steel, the wire fence on top of that.
You still have that date artifact on site?
What's that?
The pop top? Never
Well, that
mind.
might have to get covered.
Mark?
But if that, obviously we'd like it if that fence could at least be down, least through that area, down, obviously on the downhill side, not have to walk through the fence or to get into that terrace area.
Put a gate. Put a little gate.
No comments.
Peter?
No questions?
Steve?
No comments, sir.
Russ?
What's the proposed fence supposed to be, Tom?
The proposed on the fence, or the
wooden, right?
pool
It's gonna
fence is, I think, just chain link
It's not a big,
fence through there and
it's
not,
so you
know.
probably got an inch and a half pipe that's sinking in the ground, right, and just,
yeah.
that's not big. Okay.
I mean, there's,
Thank you, Mr.
don't need footing. I mean, it's, if it's allowed down there, it'd be so well held in place when everything grows through it that it won't need footings or anchors.
Just be hanging.
Betsy?
No questions, thanks.
Kevin?
I agree with Jen. I'd like to see that pool fence shrunk.
Sorry, Kevin.
I think it should, personally, I think it should be confined to the area around the pool and the terrace.
All right.
Frank, I mean, either that, or you gotta come up with a magical way to meet the building code and have area underneath for coyotes and things that go howl and squeak in the night.
Kevin?
I'm not that, I mean, technically, he can meet the requirement for a fence. And it doesn't do any good, but technically it would meet it, you know, as far as the code is concerned. The only comment I would make is, when you first came with this, I thought to myself, "Gee, I felt sorry for this guy. He had to buy that huge lot, and he could only have that little corner that you carved out to build his house." Well, I went out and saw the house today. I don't feel sorry for him anymore.
You fit a lot
All
in
right.
on a small corner of a lot.
May I ask a question?
Of course.
Did
Nice
we,
neighborhood.
did we require something between the mitigation plantings and the lawn?
And the lawn?
Well,
Oh, a
but
single rail
delineating
fence?
the mitigation plantings.
I don't recall.
I
I
mean,
don't recall,
does it-
Betsy, the order of conditions is right in front of you.
Well, let me ask you this question, Tom.
Yes.
Does the building code require a chain link fence?
Yes.
They require a non-climbable fence, and it's usually chain link.
But you could potentially put like a attractive, like what you're gonna have down on your little terrace. You could, maybe a little more elaborate than that, because you could
It would have to be, I think,
more.
one on the terrace is
more-
like a horizontal cable, and you probably have to have vertical
But you could
slats
have
that can't be
vertical and hor-
climbed.
Yeah, but I'm thinking you could delineate you could make the fence so you delineate that mitigation planning, and then you take it around your terrace, and then come back in with the mitigation planning. I'm just
Being an architect.
giving you being a landscape architect, yeah.
Fence designers are us. All right.
Used to be my.
Any more comments from the board?
Chain link fence.
Any comments from the public?
So we
Need a
have to
motion?
see, well, what's my motion gonna be? Don't we have to make a decision on the fence?
I think so. We either, or we will mandate it to go strictly within so many feet of the pool.
No, we won't.
No, we can't do that.
Well, then we won't close it. I won't vote to close it. I won't vote. I think this is something we have to decide. I think we have to hear arguments in favor of it. So I think it needs to be continued with a redesign.
Would you like to revisit the fence?
It's Tom's decision whether to have a,
Yeah, it's your call.
I will, well, if you couldn't condition it, I mean, I wouldn't say within a certain distance of the pool, because obviously if the pool is along and if you said within 10 feet of the pool, then that would put the fence, across here, which, that kind of condition couldn't, wouldn't work. But I mean, if you could condition it to be on the uphill side, or at least not through the existing vegetated area, except possibly at this.
You just wanted the resource
I think
there,
you're
the
better
buffer.
off going back and redesigning it and come back and see if you can sell us.
I'd buy the limit of work line.
What?
I can't hear you.
Along the old limit of work line, where Tom just said. So
Yeah,
follow
I mean,
the
that's
little hand.
fine.
If we can put it along between the existing and the mitigation planting,
Yeah, that's
along the
fine.
limit of work line,
All right.
except
I
not.
mean, usually, Tom, we don't like the mitigation plantings inside the pool
No,
fence
I know.
because, you understand that,
Sometimes
why.
they disappear.
Yeah.
Right. No,
Oh, I can't remember a time where we've allowed the mitigation plantings to be inside a pool enclosure.
Well, that's why I
Pool-
suggested
Pool
we
enclosure is a
put
pool
it-
enclosure, it's not a yard enclosure.
Yeah,
That's the pool and the terrace and maybe a
If-
small grass strip.
If there's not a simple way to condition it, then I'd have to request a
don't think there is.
continuance to.
I mean, you
look
could
at.
you didn't change the configuration of your mitigation plantings, did you?
No.
No, you might wanna look into doing that to provide a more aesthetically,
Yeah, I think Greg Billows is doing
Design,
something,
yeah.
but he's not done with it yet, so.
I might say something, yeah.
Hold on, let him talk.
so, I mean, I don't think there's an easy way to condition it, Tom, where,
There wouldn't be confusion.
because we're not the applicant, so.
Right.
I wouldn't wanna do that to
You
them.
want a revised plan?
Yeah, we want a revised plan. I wouldn't feel comfortable conditioning it, Tom.
Yeah.
Wouldn't, so if the board,
We'd be designing it for you.
yeah,
Wanna do that?
so, I mean, if the board's, I
Pardon?
mean, you can see if they'll close it, or if they wanna redesign. I mean, it's gonna be up to them.
If we could get on for, what'd you say, the next, well, obviously,
The next one after, well, it's the
31st.
17th or the 31st. We're not on the we don't meet the 24th. That schedule's been out for like 6 months now.
Do we have room on the 17th, if it's just to see where the fence is?
17th, obviously I can't get it in a week ahead of time. but-
But it's not like it's a huge thing.
not a
It's
huge
like,
thing,
where's
it's
the
pool
fence?
Yeah, I mean, if we could do it for the 17th, I can come on and,
Could you get us something by Friday?
All right with
yes.
that?
I'll talk with Greg and
Give me
the
1
owner
second,
and
Betsy.
see what we can do, and I'll get a plan back.
Okay, it just depends on how busy we are on the
Yeah.
17th.
That and
Our
the issue.
discretion.
You can do it. You get 3 notices, you have 1, and then 2 notices we continued. The parking lot, so 1 notice you haven't heard, so that's 4 new notices, and 2 continued at the parking lot. You could do it. I won't be here next week, so
Yeah,
it'll
but
be
this shouldn't
Friday.
be very long.
That's fine.
I mean,
I mean,
we'll
if the
either-
board's fine with it, we can do it on the 17th.
Does that give you enough time?
Can you get to, what, Greg, right?
Greg,
Yeah.
So at the request of the
Yeah.
applicant, I continued this till 7/17/19.
Second.
I'll second that.
Already second.
Peter did. Okay, you got a comment?
Yeah, I think it's important you get your client on board with this, so.
It is.
Mark, did you have something? No. Okay. So we have a motion and a second to continue until the 17th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you, Tom.
okay, thank you.
Yep, biggest stuff.
117 Surf Drive has been continued. Continued hearing under an enforcement order, David Howe, Lot 479 Vineyard Street, Falmouth, Mass., for altering a coastal beach, which is resource area that is under the protection of the Wetlands Protection Act, 310 CMR 10.27, and Falmouth Wetland Regulations 10.27.
So yes, at the last hearing, the board continued it until today to give Mr. Howe another opportunity to address the board's concerns and to come and meet with you. Remember, he wanted it to the end of August. Mr. Chairman, we had sent a letter saying that that would be agreeable to this board with the condition that he cease and desist all activities related to the order of conditions. We then had, we sent that letter out. He responded. He was not agreeable to that. Gave him one last chance to appear today. We received a letter about 3:30 this afternoon.
Yeah.
And he is requesting that you retract his June 13th letter. Now, some of the issues that I had identified in that violation letter, and the hearing is an opportunity for the resident or identified property owner to come in and address the concerns of the board. Okay, we haven't voted in an enforcement order yet. It was made very clear in the last letter I sent that this was an opportunity to address the board. Obviously, you know, we had determined that some of the issues were non-issues. We did receive certain things that were lost in the file, so that was addressed. But we still have the issue of the sorting of and removing the cobble of the beach.
Did we ever get the topos from Jeff Johnson?
Beach profiles.
No,
The
we don't.
profiles, I'm sorry.
No, we don't have the beach profiles from,
Didn't he say he did them?
I have an
Did I
email from,
misunderstand?
I have an email from Jeff that says that they had done the original one and they were going to do the other one, but they were never submitted to us.
So, I mean, it's not your responsibility to get those, it's Mr. Howe's responsibility to get them
Yeah.
from his.
And we still have the issue of the sorting machine.
But what-
Anyway, he did send this letter at 3:30 this afternoon, and
So if we issue an enforcement order, what is it gonna be for? I mean,
I think it would just be to cease and desist the use of the sorting machine. I think at this point, the sorting of the cobble, and Brendan made a really good observation, was it today or yesterday?
Yep.
That basically he's created a plateau, and that where the waves are, there's no gentle slope like the adjacent Butters Beach or even the adjacent Acapesket Beach. It kind of goes like this and drops off.
familiar with this at all?
Yeah.
So, at this point, I think some of the issues have been resolved. We still don't have the beach profiles from when they put the sand on the beach. A profile was supposed to be done. I'm sure it's probably just at Holmes and McGrath's office, but we don't have a copy in the file. I went and searched the emails again. I never received an email with a copy of the thing that I can find. You have to understand there are reams and reams and reams of emails regarding this property from the abutters and everything else. We were inundated last summer.
Well, how does that work with the fact that we allowed him to rake?
But that's gonna be a decision of the board. I mean, really, it's, you allowed him to rake the beach. Does the board consider the use of this
But
machine
he's altering the
that?
profile is what you're,
He's altering the,
He's altering
Okay.
the
The beach.
volume and the form of the beach.
because the
So
enforcement order
raking
has
the-
to be specific, correct?
Yes, no. And raking the beach, in this board's mind, we always think of the beach rakes we always see, or people going out and hand raking. I don't think at the time that the board issued the order of conditions, we envisioned the use of this type of machine, because quite frankly, I had never seen one before. You know, I'm used to the normal beach rakes that I see. They, you know, have their own issues, but this one is specifically sorting that out. It is specifically changing the volume and the dune and the form of that beach.
But that's two different issues though, right? I mean, the raking and the changing of the profile
No, so,
with the same machine.
yes, so I mean, they're sorting out that cobble and they're changing the volume and the form of the
No,
beach,
Betsy.
right? Okay, by the use of this machine. At the same time, this machine is quote-unquote cleaning the beach, but it's also doing much more than that. So it really is up to the board on what we would like to do. The order of conditions for this property expires March of next year.
I just wanna make sure that, you know, if
I
we're gonna
think
do an
you're on-
enforcement order,
I
it's,
think you're on solid ground. I do. After my conversations with DEP, and DEP will not put something in writing.
Okay. I just want to make
And
sure.
no, no, and I understand that.
There are two resources that are in play here. One is the volume and profile of the beach has changed.
Correct.
And the second is
And there,
the ability of that dune, first of all, the dune grass, the beach grass at the base of the dune had been buried by this, there's a chunk
Cobble.
of beach that goes into where the dune would be.
Yeah.
And so the dune, so it's not just the beach, that's not the only resource. The dune itself is affected.
All right, so there's two different issues
yeah,
so far.
and also, there were a number of issues raised by the abutter that we haven't had the opportunity to either confirm or, just
Yeah,
say
I just don't
it's
think we
not an
should
issue.
go off of that.
We what? No, I understand. It's up to the board.
I don't.
No, that's why I'm just asking,
No,
like,
and, and I know you
what
had
do we
wanted the.
know?
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that probably at compliance time that we're gonna discover. I mean, there were some serious, allegations of removal of dune, not the one by the road, but by the one kind of the upper dune that goes along all the properties. But we haven't had the opportunity to confirm that because every time we enter the site, we're asked to leave within 2 minutes.
Courtney?
It's my understanding that if there's an open order of conditions, that we have a right to go on the property.
That is correct, Courtney.
Okay?
That
So
is
what's the issue?
That is correct. The issue is that this particular property owner is extremely aggressive,
Okay, fair enough.
and
don't have a-
I do not, quite
I'm not
frankly,
worried.
I
I'm not
didn't just
concerned
want
whether
to
he's aggressive or not.
poke
If
the
we have a
bear.
right to go on there, then we have to exert that right. As far as I'm concerned, if he's denying us the right to go on there, then that's part of it. That's part of the enforcement order.
That is an enforcement
That's an
action.
issue. I mean, he's
Simple.
saying,
I
he's
understand
saying we're
that,
not
but
telling what
The
it
other-
is, but
the
he
other
won't
thing
let
that
us go on
concerns
to
me-
look.
The other thing that concerns me, and you raised the issue of changing technology, but when we put in the condition that he was allowed to rake the beach, it was primarily to clear a little rack out of the way, so that,
Correct.
and that was that was the function. It was not to dig up rocks and change the profile. So I think, to me, regardless of whether there's a machine employed or not, I think he's violating the intent of the order. The third thing is,
It looks like a gravely.
and so I think that's grounds for enforcement.
Russell, I can show you
How
a
far
video.
down it goes, I don't know, but it does pull up.
Anyway, go on, Courtney.
Said it could rake
I would insist, if there has been no beach profile done, and that was a condition of the order, then that's another reason for enforcement,
That's the gray area.
okay? Now, if they can produce one, then that doesn't have to be part
That's
of it.
not an issue, yeah.
But if they produce one, and the beach profile that was drawn, and what exists out there, and have a different, that's a grounds for an enforcement.
Allegations by the neighbors,
I don't think, just because the guy writes an aggressive letter,
because he's been.
Oh, it's not the letter that is aggressive.
that's why we have town council.
I understand that, Courtney, it's not the letter that, it's just, they ask us to leave quite aggressively
But I
with
had
their attorneys
proposed
present.
one
And,
2 weeks ago.
I don't feel comfortable just wandering on the person's property.
No, I understand that, but if we have the right,
These all,
because there's an open order of conditions,
and then we would
then,
accommodate his time.
for him to just
And in the meantime,
get on his high horse and tell us not to go,
myself and staff
he's wrong.
and
And we
our
gotta stand on it.
and
Oh, yeah.
kind of
Now,
they're
if we have an issue with that,
violation.
consult with town council.
Okay?
I'm sorry, I'm getting
No,
old
no,
and grumpy.
you're correct.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Hold on.
Let me just say this. I agree we have the right to go on property. But I also am not comfortable with putting staff in the position of going down there, frankly, without police protection, and I don't know if we want to get into something like that.
Discuss this.
And, I mean,
I don't think that's necessary, Kevin. I don't think that's at all.
you know, you can't go down there alone.
No, and that's not the issue. I didn't want to inflame or antagonize the situation.
Yeah.
It
think
already
that's
exists down there.
Absolutely appropriate.
Yes.
People have certain feelings about private property, but the fact is, if you choose to come before a board to get permission to do something, and you get an order of conditions, and he's alleging that we haven't shown that he hasn't done the conditions, but he also won't allow anybody
To
to
access the
examine
site.
it. And actually, as I said 2 weeks ago, I don't really have to go on the property. All I have to do is stand on the road and look, and I can see that that's not a normal beach, and I can see that that's not a normal dune.
Correct.
And it would be,
And last week, I stood on his neighbor's beach with their permission.
Correct.
And you can look at the Downey's beach and all the other beaches this way, and you look at his beach, and it's completely different.
Correct.
All I was trying to accomplish by getting him to, for lack of a better word, grant us permission is that it wouldn't be adversarial, it would just be, you know.
Exactly, and
I was just hoping that he would just say, you know what, come down and go look, and then it wouldn't be, I don't know.
I
So
agree-
obviously
I
that
would-
failed, you know, we
Right.
gave him 2 opportunities.
Yeah.
So, again, I just want to make sure whatever we issue, it's specific.
Yeah,
So ho-
It will
we
be
don't-
incredibly specific.
No, you know, you
And we
I can
should,
write something
we should
that's-
limit those specifics to 1 or 2 things that we.
Well, it has to be what we know, not what's
Definitely
alleged
know.
by somebody else.
Correct.
no, there's
Yeah.
two,
And
there's
I-
two
and I get
resource
that.
areas that are impacted, and we need the before
Mhm.
beach profile, and we need the immediate after beach profile. And if
Now we need another
it's
one.
obvious, we might request that
Require an updated one.
another beach profile to show
So-
that this is,
If the board wants to, we can, you can, issue an enforcement order, we can draft one up and have one for you to review on the 31st, so that you're all very comfortable, that is very locked down and very specific. Like I
Yeah.
said, some of the issues in that original letter have been resolved, some have not, but we still have the issue of the dune. And just to let this board know, when we receive a complaint, we don't immediately put it on an agenda and have you guys have an enforcement hearing. The way the staff will handle something like this is we reach out to the property owner, we let them know that there's been an alleged, complaint of an alleged violation, and we request permission to meet with them on the site to confirm, or, just dismiss the complaint. That's how we usually handle it. If it's something, if we do go on site and meet with the residents, we do determine that there is some sort of violation, however big or small, depending on the severity in the staff's opinion. We sometimes handle it, on a staff level. We'll have them file something to
address the
mitigate,
issue.
restore, or if it's quite large, then we tell them that it will have to go before the board. And you've seen us work with people that have come here, that have actually done something that they didn't realize, and you've seen the staff work with these people to help them through the process. You've all seen me do that.
And
Okay?
that's
Very
what our
recently,
job,
Yeah.
on a
that's what we
beach.
should do.
Yeah, so, it's very recently on the beach, and we'll get to that next one shortly. So if you want to vote an enforcement order specifically related to the dune and the beach and the profile, we can do that. You can review it, make sure you're comfortable with it, sign it, and we'll send it off. We've given Mr. Howe now, 2 opportunities to address, come before you.
Yeah.
He just waits till the 11th hour and sends us a letter and tells you, Mr. Chairman, to retract the letter.
Steve, did you have
Quite
something?
frankly, it doesn't CC me on any of these emails.
Yeah, that, I find that very
No, Mr.
disturbing
Chairman, I
also.
didn't have anything further. I just wanted to say that we're being very repetitive of our meeting on June 12th, where we.
Correct.
Yes.
Where we requested an enforcement order, and we're just doing the same thing again. So can we just move this forward? And
We can.
Yeah, so-
The purpose of that was to try and get Mr. Howe to engage us in a positive manner, and because some of the violations are alleged,
I understand.
that's all. Peter, do you have anything?
No.
Mark?
No.
So may,
Okay.
may I make a motion
Please.
to issue an enforcement order, but subject to Jen
draft.
preparing a draft on the 31st, which we'll discuss before we actually issue
Yeah, we'll
it.
put down vote enforcement order.
Right.
Okay, so we'll make an agenda item to vote enforcement order.
So we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second?
We have a second. So we have a motion and a second on the table, to have staff draft an enforcement order that will be voted on the 31st. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Other business, approve, is it Nemasket or is
Yes,
it
it is
Nemasket? Okay,
Nema-
Nemasket
I say
Enforcement Order
Nemasket.
Plan.
So this is the friendly, well, we found it to be friendly.
Sam's
Night,
leaving just
Sam.
for the record.
Good night, Sam.
So, they've provided a plan to us, but they got the plan to us a little late for you to all be able to review. You all have a copy in your packets. You'll be reviewing it next week so we can move the process forward. They're still looking for that really fine white sand, but you wanted to approve the plan. We issued the enforcement. You wanted to approve the plan. They got the plan to us a little late, but we've been working with Tom. We've met with Tom like, what, twice now?
Yeah, 3 times at least.
Yeah, 3 times to review the plan. We realized we didn't like when you were, first saw Tom, we were gonna snake that path around. It was cutting into the A buffer of a wetland, and so the staff decided to just keep the path where it had originally been. So he has provided you a plan, and like I said, it's in your packets, and you'll review it on the 17th and approve it, and then we can move forward.
Okay.
Okay, with implementation. Okay?
So,
That's it, just continue it to the 17th.
okay. Do we need
Oh,
a motion for that?
Make a motion to continue to the 17th.
Yep.
Second. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay. Approve installation of signs on conservation property.
Yes, so just to let the board know, I did go before the Board of Selectmen Monday night to, I forgot to bring them up and show you.
31st, you can bring them up,
Yeah.
or send us pictures.
Signs that were given to us by Greg Berman of Sea Grant and the Cooperative Extension on, just discouraging the use of storing your dinghy or kayak on salt marshes and dune grass. There were 4 town-owned properties that have been, kind of like problem properties with the boat storage in the past. So we wanted to install these signs to kind of discourage the practice. So we did receive approval. These are properties that are under the care and control of the Board of Selectmen. I will be identifying, and we just haven't gotten around to it, there are a few conservation properties as well that are under your care and control that will come to you and say, we're gonna put signs on these properties for these reasons, and provide you with the information, how many boats are out there. That said, there was a lot of concern from the Board of Selectmen on, how people were gonna react to these signs. And they're not scary signs, they're happy, colorful signs, but they're big. So I did have a conversation with Greg Frazier, and we are looking at the possibility of implementing some sort of dinghy storage program, kind of like the town of Mashpee has recently done in recent years, or the town of Bourne has, where a valid mooring holder would be issued a dinghy storage, with the town would install dinghy racks, and a valid mooring permit holder would be assigned a spot where they would have a sticker assigned to their mooring, and they could store their dinghy. There are a few examples out there. It's not gonna be implemented this year. Greg and I had one discussion about it. We're planning to go look at some in Mashpee, and we'll see how many we can. But I mean, it's gonna be a long process, and hopefully we might be able to have it done by next summer. But the concern was that people that have been historically, leaving their dinghies to access their moorings would not be able to do that. And my concern is, my job is to protect the resource areas, so my concern is they're causing erosion. They're being stored on marshes, they're smothering the Spartina, their marshes are eroding the way, and we have a big problem along Great Bay where a lot of these are being stored at the base of that coastal bank, smothering the vegetation and increasing the erosion. So that's what that's about. And I will have those, we'll try to get some sites identified under your care and control for the 31st meeting.
Okay.
Okay?
Excellent.
I'll move to approve the installation of signs
No,
as described.
continue.
Oh, it's continued?
Yeah,
All right,
31st.
I'll move to continue this until
31st.
31st.
Motion and a second to continue this till the 31st. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Two other things under other business. First off, you guys probably heard about the Board of Health maybe haven't heard, they've created a pesticide working group. So I'm looking for a volunteer to participate in that. They plan to meet once a month. Mark was participating, but he can't make the next meeting.
He can't make the next meeting, neither can I,
Okay.
because that's next week.
So, is it the 15th or the 16th, you remember?
It's one of those two.
So you need
Who wants to jump in
16.
for pesticide?
So you need
So-
a fill-in, is that what you're saying? Or permanent?
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jamie, because I didn't stay for the entire meeting last time, like, obviously Mark's just not gonna be able to do next week's, but he will be able to participate in some of the meetings going forward. So you'll definitely have a staff presence there, for the most part. Most of the time you'll have a staff presence, but I did think they wanted to open it up to a board member if you were interested.
Courtney,
And I
go
think
for it.
that's,
Yeah, I'll go.
Courtney, you wanna do it?
Courtney's
Yeah.
volunteering.
Okay.
Do you wanna do that?
Huh? What's that?
Thank you.
No, I mean, I'm happy to be the substitute for this one, and we'll see how it goes.
Okay,
Works for me.
all right.
Courtney for the next 3 years, got it.
What
Okay,
happens?
What's
again,
the,
it's
Just got
what's the date of
reappointed.
it?
Through July
Where?
22.
I'll have Mark send you
July
the
16th at 6:30. It was in the old, no, it was downstairs.
It's in the civil defense room now, it's gonna be in the old water department?
The where?
No? I didn't
No,
hear.
it was downstairs, but Scott McGann is supposed to, may rethink that. I'll let you know if I hear differently.
Okay,
But
July 16th is what?
July
day?
16th at 6:30.
And
Thank you.
that's what day?
No idea.
It's Tuesday.
It's Tuesday, thank you. So that's a week, that's next Tuesday.
Okay, and,
Okay.
hold on.
It's either Monday or Tuesday. I'll confirm that. Courtney?
Betsy's requested some time for
All right.
Coonamessett River.
All right, two things. One is, and I don't know that Jen sent this, but perhaps Jen could send it to everyone.
What?
Jen,
What?
the Association to Preserve Cape Cod is having a series of talks on not talks, but field trips on restoration. The first one is next Tuesday, and I'll lead it on the Coonamessett River restoration. And the next one's the following Tuesday.
Who
which
sent
will
that email?
Be the Charles River.
Did April send those emails?
April or Gary. I'll send it to you. So that's one thing. The second is I've been taking various groups, including people working here in Town Hall. I got plenty of time. And Russ mentioned today that there are other people who'd like to go. They'd like to go on a Saturday. And so Russ has kindly volunteered
Well,
to
you
organize
volunteered me.
that. I'm willing to give some talks on
Amy, is that thing working?
some tours explaining what was done for restoration
It's not working.
and why it's,
Sure it is, the time's almost up.
Yep, there you go.
why it's occurring.
Doesn't
But-
work that way.
We need a little bit of help, right? So you must have some people who are interested.
Yes,
So,
but I think we should put it all, I think we should put it in the paper too.
well, I'm gonna let you organize that.
Yeah. I'm gonna look at that, cause it really needs to be, cause people have mentioned it to me, geez, you have it during the week, I work during the week, you know?
Well, everyone who's asked me, I've said, if you're interested in a tour, contact me, we'll arrange, get a few people, we'll arrange. I take almost 2 tours a week there, so I'm happy to.
Must be nice to be retired.
This is,
It's a great project.
It's
It
a
is.
wonderful
Everybody should
project.
see
And
Retirement.
Betsy is
It is.
poured her heart and soul into this project, and she wants to show it off.
It's a far cry from.
Betsy, just we'll
the
work together.
cranberry
We can
We're
put
gonna have
something
another
in.
ribbon cutting
Yeah.
pretty soon.
We can put something in the paper.
Wonderful.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I don't wanna do it every Saturday,
What?
right?
No,
But
we're
I'd
gonna
love-
we're gonna pick a Saturday.
Right, but
we're
I would
putting the
love
other-
to
Oh,
to
Phase
provide
two.
the
Yeah,
opportunity for
phase
people
two.
who wanna understand what
Yes,
took
no,
place
I
there.
understand that.
Yeah, you set a date, and if it
Yeah,
can
we're
be
gonna set a date.
advertised,
Done.
then you don't have to do it every.
Yeah.
All right, we good?
We're good.
All right, vote order conditions.
Mr. Chairman, I'm
Oh,
gonna
God.
take
I
my
mean,
leave,
this isn't-
'cause I
honestly,
wasn't
this isn't
involved in
very
any of these
long. I mean, this is
deliberations, so.
Wait a second, mine's
Wait a
only
minute.
2 pages long. There's a third page.
Flip it over.
You're missing a page.
Yeah.
Missing a page.
Well,
you
I
tore
guess
it
that
off.
means I can go too.
Yeah.
Nope.
There you go. Okay.
You have to stay extra, because you lost
Ridge
your
Road,
third page.
I vote order of conditions.
Bye, Russell. It's so nice to have you back.
should stay
Russ,
so you
we
can get
love
brought back
having
up
you
to
here.
speed. Use it to get rid of the rust.
See you guys next week.
So Ridge
See you
Road.
tomorrow.
Jamie, can you
First
read this
up,
Thanks, Jane.
Ronald Simmons, 14
Russ,
Ridge
thanks.
Road, North Falmouth, Mass.
This is the modifications to the existing house. The issue on this one was the, let me get it, the use of that, old buried road or
Yep.
driveway. Yeah, remember? So I think the way the board had left it, and forgive me, because I'm operating on a whole bunch of different plans, so I think my notes are on a plan that I don't have here, was that we said, I think the notes might be on your plan. Isn't that, and you know what, there's another one downstairs.
We said if the thing doesn't work, that's where the extra,
Yeah, they have to
Mitigation plans
show
would go.
in a revised plan an area of mitigation that they possibly could use if their pavers did not work.
right,
Okay.
That's right.
that's,
I think that was the only real issue.
they haven't done
Yeah.
anything else.
Yeah, those geodesic surveys or whatever they were, they're cool.
You can't argue with
Find
that.
that road. I can't argue with it.
Did you see the ones for the
We'll
mess?
also find
They're
bodies.
fascinating.
I did not see that.
Oh, I'll show them to you.
Other than that, does anybody remember anything else?
That's the only note I had.
Yeah, I
I'll
think
do
that
it.
was it. I mean, she gave a very thorough kind of detailed, right around the property of what was gonna happen, so we've been out there. I've been out there, I think, 3 times, so,
So, other than the standard stuff.
yeah, okay.
I make a motion to accept as we just discussed.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? I don't know why you'd oppose order conditions.
All of us, I think. We just, yeah,
Yeah.
it was open and closed.
Right. One meeting.
Next up, Michael McGordy, 610 and 14 Cypress Street, Falmouth, Mass. This is the paving.
This is the drainage improvements for Cypress. Really, the drainage improvements are a good thing. I think, I really didn't have any concerns from a wetlands bylaw or Wetlands Protection Act issue on the design. Two of the quirky things about this was the kind of neighbor disagreement that withdrew it the first time. I did receive something from Frank that, confirmed that it only does need to be recorded on 610 and 14 Cypress. So I think that was, what the whole holdup was the last time, was nobody could agree on whose property deed it needed to be recorded on. But I did receive
Great, that's great.
guidance from council that says that it
And-
only needs to be recorded on 610 and 14. So that's a good thing.
The paving will only go down as far as the buffer from the
Yep.
because they just can't go any further.
Yeah.
Can we compel them to get rid of that treehouse?
And we're gonna tell
No.
them to get rid of the treehouse.
You can compel them, I
So
don't
back to
think
the
you
neighbor
would.
thing, the neighbors were okay with it, they just didn't want it recorded on their property.
Correct.
So that's resolved,
That's resolved.
perfect.
The whole thing's resolved.
Love neighbor
Just
disputes that
great.
get resolved.
Yep, so,
He actually spoke in favor of the project.
Yes, he did.
yeah,
So
no,
that's
I think,
always
and
a
I mean,
positive
it's still in land court. I do believe it's still pending in land, there's still some land court issues, so,
Well, that's not our issue.
no, it's
So I move to accept the order as discussed.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Lastly, College Light Opera Company, Inc., 54 Chappaquoit Road, West Falmouth, Mass.
What?
Were there issues with this?
No, it's such a beautiful plan.
Yeah, I mean, the neighbors had an issue, but they didn't understand that that float wasn't gonna be out there permanently. The float's just there while the work's
I mean,
being
I
done.
think the biggest thing for staff on this project, I mean, on the face, it looks like a really large project, there's a lot going on.
Yep.
They're losing that beautiful beech tree, which is so sad to me. Either that, or they were gonna love it to death, because they were gonna destroy its root systems and
Right.
slowly die. I think the whole thing with my concern of this whole project is the dewatering. So the town has reviewed the dewatering, the town has some concerns, they addressed the town's concerns by putting in the monitoring wells. I think the town had said to install like, wellheads while they're dewatering. Remember that the dewatering's going out onto a raft, and it's gonna be like spraying water.
Nice fountain out there.
Are they gonna light it
Nice
up?
fountain.
The ponds
Yeah.
use the circulation.
And the float
the float-
grounds out at low tide.
Well, we're gonna check, that float's not gonna be able to ground out at low tide, so it might have to go a
But
little bit.
the
further
important
out.
thing to remember is this is gonna go on for like a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not,
And that's to
Oh,
install,
that's not gonna be permanent damage.
if they do it the right time of
week.
year,
I
they'll be
mean, if
fine.
it-
What?
They are before I mean, this isn't gonna happen anytime soon, they're not before the planning board until August. So,
But they're hoping to do it this next winter season, I'm
yes,
sure.
correct.
yeah.
And then there was some concerns about, the habitat around the pond and
Right.
how they were gonna replant and remove the invasives. So, does the board have any concern with that? I think Kim did a nice job on her plan.
Yeah, and
I had
think
sat
they
with them
I think they
discussing the
said that
areas
they
of
weren't
mitigation
gonna
and
really-
restoration.
Any of the work they were gonna do would not impinge on what's existing around
Correct.
the pond.
Mhm.
The only thing that worries me and everybody is apparently they've done it a couple times and it's worked, but, I've,
Is
it's
what?
another denitrifying system. And if it works, great. If it doesn't work, well, we'll try something else. But whatever they try, it's gotta be better than the cesspools that are
Correct,
scattered all over
Especially
the
in that
property
area.
now.
correct.
No, I'd be curious to see that system when it's,
I'll let you know.
Yeah, I'd like to see them working on it.
Is the system that's in,
Mr. Chairman?
I'm trying to think of where it is, somewhere in East Falmouth, maybe off Davisville Road, there's a bigger septic system that serves a number of houses. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's off of Curl Road.
Yeah, does that work?
I'm assuming it works. It's outside of our jurisdiction. We didn't,
Looks like it works. It
there's
doesn't.
so
But I
many
mean, you haven't heard the
systems
health
out-
department have any issues with it.
No?
I don't believe so. I know which one, you're talking about the little package,
That's a
little,
Right.
yeah,
system also,
yeah.
so,
And a significant member of the fire department lives right down the end of the road there, so I'm sure if something was up, we would have heard.
okay, I'll make a motion to.
Mr. Chairman, hold on. The neighbor's other comment were that the College Light Opera has a history of cutting down trees wherever it was inconvenient for them.
Yeah.
I would like the order of conditions to make sure that they understand that any maintenance on this property would require your approval.
Okay,
Thank you.
Because they did seek administrative approval for a tree recently, right? Within this year, last year?
It might have been with Mark in like 2016, I could check for you. I haven't been out there for that.
I know Leighton did some, I wanna say Leighton, or, I went out there once with Leighton to look at some work, Leighton Allenby, but
And
I
the
don't
area
know
they're
if he
calling
really
a
did the
lawn
work
that
or
they're
not.
using for remediation is a meadow at this point.
Right.
It's not a lawn. I think it functions well as a meadow.
All right. You may.
Make a motion to accept this discussed.
Second.
Great.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. That's it, folks.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're done.